Chapter 3397. Why aren't you telling us what's going on? Third Miss wasn't the one who caught the girl, one of the guards said. 2 days ago, when Third Miss went for a walk in the Haga district, a black-clothed man suddenly appeared and threw the girl to Third Mississippi. That man also said that he ran into someone sent by Captain Jing to investigate on Seekong Planet in the lower star zone. The men sent by Guard Commander Jing have all been killed. The guard spilled the beans like a bamboo tube. He made a prompt decision to capture the Crown Princess' younger sister. That's why he was able to escape in such a dangerous situation. We also felt that this matter was very strange. However, when Third Miss heard that the girl was the younger sister of the Crown Princess of the Divine Province, she insisted on doing it and didn't listen to anyone's advice at all. Our spies in the imperial capital of the Divine Province should have already made their move. What move? Jing Linyao suddenly had a bad premonition and her entire body tensed up. The guard lowered his head and whispered, "Yesterday, I heard that Third Miss sent the spy in the imperial capital to deliver a letter to the Crown Princess." Jing Linyao's eyes widened in shock and she immediately walked out of the tent. The guards hurriedly stopped her and said with shame, "Princess Jing, I'm sorry. We can't disobey Third Miss orders." Jing Linyao naturally knew that Outstanding Talent Camp only obeyed the orders of the person holding the tablet. Now that the tablet was in Jing Minyao's hands, the people of Outstanding Talent Camp would only listen to her orders. Jing Linyao nodded and clenched her fists. She said coldly, "I know you have your difficulties, but you have to believe me. If you don't let me out to make arrangements, the Aurora Desert will be destroyed overnight. All the members of the Pangu clan will be annihilated." She knew the young Crown Princess too well. When they first met in Shuntian Prefecture, the young Crown Princess was determined to execute Jing Minyao with her own hands. The Crown Princess had never been a kind person. An eye for an eye. The Crown Princess definitely wouldn't let any of them off since Jing Minyao, this idiot, had kidnapped her younger sister. She had to go out and arrange everything. She couldn't imagine it. It was as if she could already see a sea of blood and corpses in front of her. "Princess Jing." The guards looked at each other and hesitantly reached out to stop her. "Believe me, if you don't let me out now, it'll be too late." Jing Linyao snapped. "If anything happens, I'll take responsibility." The guards looked at each other. Because of Princess Jing's prestige in the clan, they didn't dare to stop her and withdrew their hands at the same time. Jing Linyao got out of the tent and sent a signal to the sky. This was a signal to Jing Jia. Although her father was not very reliable, Jing Linyao knew that only when her father came back as soon as possible could they stop the war that was about to start. Jing Minyao came out of her tent and pointed at Jing Linyao with a face full of resentment. "Arrest her!" Hundreds of Outstanding Talent Camp's guards rushed up and fought with the dozens of guards that came out from Jing Linyao's side. The scene was a bit chaotic. The tent was torn apart and several stoves that were placed outside the tent fell down one after another. The fire started to spread and accidentally set Jolin's tent on fire. Jing Linyao's expression changed greatly. She hurriedly shouted, "Go save her." Chapter 3398. At the same time, at Rouge Pavilion in Dragonflame City. Arbor was already waiting in the lobby of Rouge Pavilion before it was even evening. Hui Feng quickly walked in and whispered something into the Crown Prince's ear. Prince Mo nodded and turned to look at Arbor. He held her small hand and said softly, "Everything has been arranged. We can leave immediately." Miss Chiao nodded expressionlessly and spat out 2 words from between her teeth, "No hurry." The shopkeeper of Rouge Pavilion was hiding behind the counter. He felt a burst of cold air above his head and couldn't help but shiver. Ever since the 2 distinguished guests brought in a group of black-clothed guards, the people in the store all ran out of the store tactfully. Although the young guard gave him a small bag of spirit coins and told him not to worry about it and to leave on his own, the shopkeeper still felt uneasy in his heart, as if something bad was about to happen. He chose to stay as long as the shop was still there and the people were still there. Right now, Xiaomu was not in the mood to care about the thoughts of irrelevant people. She held a flower cup in her hand, which emitted a faint cracking sound. Although no expression could be discerned from her face, she was abnormally furious on the inside. wanting to slaughter all of her enemies. These people were truly extraordinarily bold to dare go to the lower star sector to mess with her family. Good, very good. Since that was the case, she would let them clearly know the price they would have to pay for messing with her family. Hui Feng lifted the curtain and walked inside. His sharp gaze met the crown prince's, and he gave a slight nod as he stepped to the side a couple of steps. A tall and sturdy man walked in with 3 or 4 attendants. Upon seeing the young crown princess, a smile appeared on that man's face. He laughed loudly and said, I've kept the crown princess waiting. This must be His Highness the Crown Prince." "Cut the crap." Arbor coldly interrupted him. "What conditions does the Panga clan want before you're willing to let them go? Speak." The burly man's expression changed slightly, and he chuckled awkwardly. "What are you saying, Crown Princess? What is our relationship with the Panga clan?" The little Crown Princess raised her hand slightly, and Hui Feng clapped his hands, ordering someone to carry out the honest man from the Panga clan and throw him in front of the brawny man. "Is this your companion?" The muscular man's face changed slightly, and he looked up at Arbor in disbelief. This person was actually captured by them? How was this possible? Also, the man had revealed his identity as a member of the Panga clan? "You're called Carquin, right?" Arbor looked at him coldly. She moved her fingers, and the flower cup was crushed into powder in her palm. "Have you thought about how you will die?" Carquin's face slightly changed. His pupils couldn't help but shrink. After a while, the shopkeeper sent off the group of nobles with trepidation and received a small bag of spirit coins. He thanked them with tears of gratitude. Arbor ordered his men to bring Carquin and his men onto Seventh Swallow's back. 500 purple forest guards were also with them. The Aurora Sand Ground was 90,000 kilometers away from the border city. With little 7 speed, it would take 7 to 8 days to get there. Arbor used the teleportation glyph array. After the glyph energy was depleted, she had little 7 carry them for a while. After the glyph energy was replenished, they continued to teleport. Just like that, everyone arrived at Clear Pass City outside the Aurora Sand Ground after a day. This city was the border between the Divine Land and the Aurora Sand Ground. Clear Pass City was very close to the Aurora Sand Ground. Even though it was called Clear Pass, it didn't feel fresh at all. The sandstorm here was extremely strong. Walking on the streets, there were people with headscarves hurriedly walking. Chapter 3399. There weren't many stalls on the streets either. After all, with such a strong sandstorm, they would only eat dust if they were placed on the streets. The most unique thing about Clear Pass City was that there were all kinds of mud kiln shops. These small shops built from mud sold medicinal herbs, talismans, and weapons. The entire street was filled with such small shops, and it looked quite prosperous. However, all the merchants who frequented this place knew that the prices of Clear Pass City's goods were not cheap. It could be said that the goods in Clear Pass City were more expensive than those in the nearby cities, but the goods were only average. Therefore, although the street was bustling with activity, the business was just so-so. It was fine to fool the foreign visitors, but the locals basically did not buy anything. On the other hand, the Panga clansmen would occasionally come to Clear Pass City to exchange for goods, so they were quite familiar with each other. Arbor's group of a few hundred people walking on the streets of Clear Pass City was naturally very eye-catching. She had someone release Carquin and the others, and they led the way. It was not easy to find the right path in the Aurora Desert and the vast sea of sand. Arbor could send the little butterflies out to find it, but it would take some time. Finding a local to lead the way was the fastest way. When City Lord Huang of Clear Pass City heard the news and rushed over, Arbor had already found a local who could lead the way. City Lord Huang hurriedly knelt down and bowed, saying in fear and trepidation, "Your subject greets the Crown Prince and Crown Princess. I did not know that the Crown Prince and Crown Princess had come to Clear Pass. Please forgive me for not coming out to meet you. We were just passing by," Mo Lien said indifferently, raising her hand to signal the middle-aged guide to come over. "This is your citizen. We need him to lead us to the Pangu clan's territory." Yes. City Lord Huang nodded, but he was a little confused. "Your Highness, you are going to the Pangu clan too. You don't have to worry about this." Mo Lien interrupted him, taking out an imperial token and waving it in front of him. Transfer the border guards here. I will be in charge of them for the next 3 days. Yes. City Lord Huang did not dare to say no. He nodded and hurriedly ordered his men to do it. Arbor turned to look at Emo Lien and tugged at his sleeve. Then I'll take them away first. Emo Lien nodded and stroked her hair. Although he knew that there wouldn't be any danger on this trip, he still reminded her, be careful. If you encounter any unforeseen circumstances, just wait for me to come and deal with it. All right. Arbor nodded. He raised his hand to summon his fire phoenix, and the 500 purple forest guards leapt onto it. At this time, Ka Kuan's face was already ashen, extremely defeated. Ever since he found out that the crown princess and her entourage only took slightly more than a day to travel from the imperial capital to Border City, he had been in a state of confusion. The girl in front of him was simply terrifying. Deep down in Karkin's heart, he had a bad premonition. He seemed to be absent-minded. I'm asking you a question. One of the purple forest guards shoved Kakin. Why aren't you talking? When Ka Kuan came back to his senses, he found that everyone was standing on a sandy ground. Arbor had already put the fire phoenix away. This place was filled with rolling sand and dust. Flying at high altitudes was not very suitable. It would be too troublesome for the fire phoenix. Furthermore, the guide said that it would take no more than 6 hours to reach the Pangu clan's territory. Arbor decided to travel by land. The little fellow swallowed a flight pill and followed the guide expressionlessly. Chapter 3400. The little girl took out a large scarf and wrapped it around herself from head to toe, then floated behind the guide. At first glance, she looked like a spirit, causing the purple forest guards' mouths to twitch uncontrollably. The guide's name was Kiki, and he was a straightforward middle-aged man. Every time he wanted to talk to the little crown princess, he would turn around and see a cold, expressionless face. He instantly had the urge to not talk to the young crown prince consort anymore. The little girl's legs were off the ground, and her body was motionless as she floated behind him. It was a frightening sight. Kiki felt lucky that it was still daytime. If it was nighttime, he would have been scared to death. The purple forest guards all put on thin armor and followed behind the little crown princess. They walked for about 5 hours without saying a word. Kiki couldn't help but say, "Crown princess, there's a quicksand area ahead. You all need to be careful." After saying that, he couldn't help but want to roll his eyes. The little crown princess had been floating the entire time. She wasn't in danger of being sucked into the quicksand at all. How much longer until we reach? We'll reach it once we pass through the quicksand area, Kiki said. Everyone follow me. Don't wander off. Arbor continued to float behind Kiki. He turned to the purple forest guards and asked, "Do you want to come to the talisman?" The purple forest guard captain couldn't help but twitch his mouth. He shook his head and said, "No need, Crown Princess. They weren't that weak. What should they do?" The little Crown Princess was always worried that they would die, so she kept trying to hide them in the talisman. Arbor said, "Oh." He floated for a while, then lowered his head and said to Kiki, "Uncle Kiki, I'll put you in a storage talisman later. Don't worry, we'll let you out once we're done with the Pangu clan." Kiki didn't quite understand, but he still nodded. Along the way, Kiki had some understanding of the little crown princess mystique. When Xiao Mu saw the continuous stretch of tents in the distance, she narrowed her eyes and gazed at the thick wall of sand outside the camp. The wall of sand was piled up by 100 years of wind and sand. It was about 10 meters tall and surrounded the entire territory of the Pangu clan. On one hand, it could fend off the sandstorm, and on the other hand, it could fend off some beasts in the sand. It was just that this kind of living environment, compared to Clear Pass City, was still very unsightly. Jing Linyao had always wanted to enter the Divine Prefecture. It was also because of the continuous sinking of the desert in recent years. Chances were that, in a few years, the entire Aurora Desert would collapse. By then, the Pangu clan would not even have a place to live. Kiki was very experienced. In less than 15 minutes, he had led the purple forest guards out of the quicksand area. He pointed at a nearby wall of sand and said, "Over there." Arbor nodded and put Kiki into the storage talisman, temporarily throwing him into the inner world. You can come out now. Following the little stoic's voice, several figures suddenly appeared behind her. Ma Ta, Ko Hongwen, Qi Xianxian, Sidu, Liang Qingqing, the Purple Forest guards all widened their eyes. They should have thought of it earlier. The crown princess must have brought a lot of people with her since she possessed a treasure like a storage talisman. The venerable Peach Blossom Immortal's figure flashed. He waved a pink little fan and said with a grin, the sandstorm here is really strong. This venerable one's eyes are red from the wind. Chapter 3401. As he spoke, the venerable Peach Blossom Immortal tugged at the little stoic's scarf. Jojo, why are you wrapping yourself up so tightly? I can't even see the little stoic's face anymore. Come quickly, lend me a small piece to cover my face. Because the sandstorm was unbearably strong, Arbor then covered her small face with 2 or 3 scarves, revealing a pair of bright, rolling eyes that were as cold as ice. The more the venerable Peach Blossom Immortal looked at her, the more interested he found her. He couldn't resist teasing this little girl. After snatching a scarf to cover his face, the venerable Peach Blossom Immortal quietly asked, Jojo, are we going to charge in and fight now? Arbor shook her small head and solemnly gazed at the camp behind the sand wall. Why are we still wasting words with them? Let's charge in and capture the main culprit and give her a death by 1,000 cuts. I'm sure she'll be willing to hand over Jojo's younger sister. The peony fairy flipped a strand of her hair flirtatiously and slandered with a chuckle. Arbor raised her hand and expressionlessly blocked this group of fellows who wanted to charge into the camp. She raised her hands slightly, and countless light gray little sand scorpions abruptly flowed out from between her fingers. They rustled as they crawled in the sand. Little by little, they accumulated into an ocean, and gradually, they densely covered the sky and earth like a sea of scorpions, enclosing half of the entire camp. The peony fairy's scalp tingled as she watched. She reflexively took a small step back and coughed. Fuck, charging in to capture people and beat them to death was a more humane method of punishment, right Jojo? This guy didn't want to do anything at all? He first surrounded them with sand scorpions, then he would definitely take the next step. He was angry. Sir Jojo must be very angry right now. Everyone took a small step back in unison. Only the venerable Peach Blossom Immortal moved 2 inches closer to Xiao Mu while waving his pink little red fan. He winked and said with a smile, people will definitely flee outside in a while. Let's use vines to circle around the sand wall. Arbor had the same idea. She turned to look at him and nodded vigorously. Ma Yingchen raised her hand and a wood spirit shot out, landing on the towering sand wall in front of her. Soon, the wood spirit formed a winding vine and began to take root and sprout, spreading in all directions. Everyone felt as if a visual feast had appeared in front of them. This was the power of a transcendent god to control the 5 spirits. The originally slow-growing vines, with the help of Sheng Chen's Saint Energy, rapidly extended their branches and leaves, covering the sky and covering the earth, rapidly spreading out outside the earthen wall. With an incomparable suppressive force, it circled the entire camp several times and extended into the sky. After only 15 minutes, the entire territory of the Panga clan was enshrouded in vines. The tiny sand scorpions crawled in through the gaps in the vines. More and more of them swarmed in. When the people in the territory of the Panga clan realized that something was wrong, most of them were too scared to come out of their tents. The intertwining vines as thick as the mouth of a bowl propped up a giant roof in the territory of the Panga clan, covering the sky and the sun. As for the soldiers who were patrolling outside the tents, when they realized that something was wrong, they quickly ran toward 3rd Miss Jing's tent. On the way, they encountered a large number of sand scorpions and were forced into a bitter battle. There was no lack of cultivators among the soldiers, but most of them were low-level spiritual masters. The defense and attack of each of these tiny sand scorpions were comparable to that of a level 6 spiritual master. Chapter 3402. Although their levels were not high, they were enough to deal with most of the guards. Moreover, they were so dense that they covered the sky and the earth, giving people a feeling of fear at first glance. Arbor pursed her lips and looked coldly at the Panga clan's land. Her voice was crisp and cold, like spring water dripping from a snowy mountain, every word smashing into the depths of people's hearts. Patriarch of the Jing family, come out. Jing Linyao, who was imprisoned in a tent and anxiously wiping the face of a girl on the bed, subconsciously shrank her fingers when she heard Arbor's voice. His eyes immediately revealed a look of shock. She rushed to the entrance of the tent, only to see an overwhelming number of sand scorpions crawling in the clan's land. Some soldiers resisted but were immediately swept into the sand scorpions and drowned into pieces. However, if they did not fight with the sand scorpions would not bite them wantonly. Instead, they drove the Pangu soldiers to an open space. A guard of the Pride camp ran in a panic and hurriedly said, "Princess, it's not good. Strong enemies are invading. What should we do now?" Jing Linyao was already shocked beyond words. She knew very well that it would take the fastest flying beast 7 or 8 days to reach the Pangu clan's land from Dragonflame City. But the crown princess arrived in 2 days? What was going on? She turned to look at Jolin, who was lying motionless on the bed, and frowned. Ever since the day of the fire, Jolin had been hit by Jing Minyao when she struggled to escape and was severely injured. She had been in a coma for the past 2 days. Jing Linyao wanted to wake the girl up, but she had fed her all kinds of medicine, but it was not very effective. She even asked the witch doctor to check on Jolin, but the answer she got was that the girl was likely to die. It was obvious how heavy Jing Minyao's slap was. After all, one was a little girl who had not even reached the spiritual realm, while the other was a level 3 divine master. The difference in strength was too great. Jing Linyao took a deep breath and turned to look at the soldier. "Father, have you arrived?" The latter shook his head. Jing Linyao quickly walked to the bed and helped Jolin up. The curtain of the tent was suddenly lifted up high by someone and then lowered down. Jing Minyao spun in front of Qiao Lin like a storm, grabbed Qiao Lin's wrist and shouted at the pale-faced guards behind her, "Drag her out." "Jing Minyao, what are you doing?" Jing Linyao was so angry that she hurriedly reached out to stop her. If it wasn't for this brainless person courting death like this, how could the entire clan have fallen into such a state? "It's none of your business." Min. Madame Jing Wang Liming ran into the tent in a panic. Pointing at the sand outside, she said with a frightened face, "Outside, there are scorpions outside. What's going on?" "Your good daughter has captured the younger sister of the crown princess of Shenzhou. Now that she has brought people to attack us, she still refuses to admit defeat and wants to continue to cause trouble." Madame Jing looked at her daughter in shock. Min, is it true?" Her gaze fell on the unconscious Xiao Lin on the bed. "It's her?" "Mother, don't get involved in this matter." "How can Mother not get involved? How many more people do you want to kill with your willfulness?" Jing Qiao angrily followed them in. She lifted the tent flap and let them see the sand scorpions that blotted out the sky and covered the earth. Chapter 3403. Do you see? There are scorpions everywhere, we have nowhere to run. Jing Qiao angrily put down the curtain and said harshly, "How long do you want to be willful? Do you want the whole clan to pay with their lives because of your willfulness?" "Qiao!" Wang Liming angrily shouted, "How can you talk to your sister like that?" Wang Liming loved her youngest daughter the most. Of course, she couldn't bear to see other people scold her beloved. Jing Minyao was also very angry. She couldn't help but take 2 steps forward, pointing at Jing Qiao and reprimanding, "How dare you? Don't say you're a member of the Pangu clan's Jing family when you go out. Father's face is about to be lost because of you." Jing Qiao angrily glared. Jing Minyao continued to scold, "Why are you panicking? Of course I have a plan. I've already sent 2 consecrators to deal with it. Consecrator Jiang and Consecrator Lan are both level 9 of the deity realm. What can't be settled? What a joke. What's the hurry?" Jing Linyao's eyes were suppressing traces of anger. These sand scorpions must have been brought here by the crown princess. Right now the other party is only releasing sand scorpions to surround us. They don't have the intention to harm us. If you rashly resist, I believe that by then you'll enrage her further, and by then it'll be out of control. When did our Pangu clan's Princess Jing become such a coward? Jing Minyao sneered at her mockingly. At the same time, the two consecrators of the Pangu clan broke through the surrounding vines and suddenly rushed out of the gate. Before they could move, they both felt their legs go numb. Lowering their heads, they saw that their legs had been tightly entangled by the vines. The two consecrators instantly lost their balance and their entire bodies were pulled downwards. Their hearts sank at the same time. Small vines could hold two deity realm experts? There was no other reason. It must be that the other party's control of the five spirits was more powerful than theirs. For you. The two consecrators calmed down. One of them, Consecrator Lon, who was at the peak of level 9 of the deity realm, spoke. Consecrator Jiang, on the other hand, looked at the group of people in Arbor with a straight face. His heart skipped a beat when he saw it. The formation of the opposing team seemed to be a little unpredictable. There was no need to mention this little stoic girl. This girl looked young at a glance, so no matter how high her cultivation was, it couldn't be that high. However, just the red-robed man standing beside her with a smile on his face was enough to make one unable to estimate his cultivation base. Even with Consecrator Zhang's eyesight, he was unable to see through the other party's cultivation. This made him suspicious, and at the same time, a bad premonition arose in his heart. Not to mention, behind the red-clothed man, there were two smiling and flirtatious women. It was a half-bald Duda with disheveled hair and slovenly appearance. They were a pair of twin brothers, and one of them was a smiling young man who was holding a saber. Consecrator Zhang's pupils constricted slightly. His gaze shifted to the side and landed on an 8 or 9-year-old boy who was looking at him coldly with pursed lips. This boy looked quite young, but the vicissitudes of life in his eyes were frightening. Who are these people? The ethereal and frightening aura on their bodies didn't seem to come from deity realm cultivation. Consecrator Jiang suddenly regretted coming out to be the bird that stood out. He felt that today's matter was most likely going to get worse. Chapter 3404. This feeling expanded even more clearly in her heart the instant she saw Consecrator Lon being flung away nimbly by a vine. The vine in Shurchen's hand tightened slightly, dragging the wailing Consecrator Lon to her side and heavily landing him on the ground. Consecrator Jiang didn't dare to be careless anymore. He hastily landed on the ground and bowed very respectfully. "Seniors, may there be some misunderstanding for you to suddenly visit the Pangu clan?" Shurchen unhurriedly tightened the vine around Consecrator Lan's wrist. Like a dead dog, Consecrator Lon was dragged in front of the stoic-faced little crown princess. "Tell your clan leader to come out," Arbor said impatiently. "Don't waste any more time. There isn't much time left for you." Consecrator Zhang's heart skipped a beat, and he turned to look at the little stoic. "The clan leader left our clan's land a few days ago for an important matter." A ruthless glint flashed through Arbor's eyes. "All right then." Consecrator Jiang saw her expression abruptly change and inwardly cursed. Just as he was about to speak, he heard the little stoic girl coldly shout, "All Purple Forest guards, listen up. Present. Charge in with me. Kill all those who resist without mercy." She didn't have that much time to waste here with them. She seemed to have sensed that Xiao Lin's situation wasn't good. For some reason, her eyelids kept twitching, and she felt that Xiao Lin was in danger right now. "Wait!" Consecrator Jiang couldn't resist shouting, "Princess! Our Princess Jing is here. You can speak with our Princess Jing if you need anything." Arbor abruptly turned her head, and her cold, electrifying gaze landed on him. Her patience had been completely exhausted. Even if the Jing clan's clan leader, Jing Ti, was standing in front of her right now, she didn't want to waste any more words with him. "Kill, kill, kill." The voices of the 500 Purple Forest guards shook half the sky. Consecrator Jiang only felt his heart tremble slightly, and he hastily shouted, "No, wait a moment. Our clan's land still has a lot of... The people inside, listen up. I don't want to kill the innocent. If you stay in the tent obediently, I can spare your lives. Anyone who leaves the tent to resist will be treated as an enemy of this crown princess. Kill them all." Arbor opened his hand, and a large number of fiery evil mosquitoes swarmed out of the 100 Poison Valley. They flapped their wings and buzzed as they flew towards the camp. Soon after, hundreds and thousands of explosive birds also rushed out. They let out a series of cries and flew through the gaps between the vines like a swarm of bees, besieging the soldiers of the Proud Heroes Battalion who were desperately resisting the sand scorpions. Bang, bang, bang. These suicidal little things instantly exploded in the barracks, causing waves of miserable howls. More than half of the members of the Panga clan were hiding in their tents, not even having the courage to extend their heads out. All he could hear were the sounds of soldiers struggling to put up a desperate struggle, as well as the screams of agony. Sounds of phoenix chirping could be heard. Qing Wan and Huofeng were the first to enter through the broken vines. He opened his mouth and a stream of fire and ice beads shot towards the soldiers of the Proud Arrogance Battalion. The soldiers of the Proud Heroes Battalion who were struggling to resist the sand scorpions under their feet, a swarm of fiery evil mosquitoes and explosive birds, were caught off guard and hit by the attack. Arbor led the crowd to kill their way in. As long as they saw anyone who blocked their way, they would cripple them regardless of the consequences. Chapter 3405. She didn't have the time to waste on these miscellaneous people right now. She was simply burning with worry. The fury in her heart was about to completely engulf this place. She increasingly felt that Shaolin Er's breathing was weakening. It wasn't a misconception. Shaolin Er was definitely in trouble. On the other side, Jing Minyao saw that the situation wasn't right and immediately pulled up Xiaolin, who was lying on the bed, out of the tent, running towards the sandy slope behind the barracks. Upon seeing this, Wang Liming and Jing Qiao also followed after her. Meanwhile, Jing Linyao was so anxious that she stomped her feet and charged out with 100 personal guards. Her heart ached incessantly when she saw the corpses of the Proud Pride Camp's soldiers lying around. This was all Jing Minyao, this brainless woman's fault. How many innocent soldiers had died because of her momentary willfulness? What right did she have to be so willful and reckless, making the innocent pay such a painful price for her willfulness? The more Jing Linyao thought about it, the angrier she became. She charged out of the tent with 100 personal guards and did her best to confront the swarm of evil, fiery, poisonous mosquitoes. Seeing her personal guards die one by one in the suicidal explosions of the explosive birds, Jing Linyao shouted angrily, "Arbor! Arbor! Get out here!" After she finished roaring out a string of curses, she turned around. Her face and body were covered in blood, and her eyes furiously met the little stoic's expressionless and cold face. She was standing far away on the other side of the sandy slope, staring at her with a cold expression. Her expression was like an ice-cold jade sculpture, without the slightest bit of human emotion. No, that wasn't it. It should be said that she didn't have the slightest bit of emotion towards strangers like them. She stood there like a jade sculpture, staring at others as if she was looking at corpses. Perhaps right now, she was looking at a mountain of corpses and a sea of blood. Other than the people beside her, everyone else was her enemy. Stop. Stop. What did they do wrong? They were only following orders. The person who truly captured your younger sister is Jing Minyao. She's already running towards the sandy slope behind the barracks. It's useless even if you kill them all. Over half of the Proud Pride Camp's 10,000 soldiers were dead or injured. Jing Linyao looked at the tragic scene in front of her and painfully closed her eyes. What right or wrong can there be in a war between two armies? Xiao Mu gazed icily at Jing Linyao, and she remarked indifferently from across the sandy ground, "You still claim to be the invincible and victorious Princess Jing in vain. When you were 12 years old, you led your clansmen to defeat the 300,000-strong giant demon clan army. Didn't you kill anyone? Our positions are different. Why are you talking to me about right and wrong? Because it is your people who are dying right now. They are the heroes that the Pangu clan raised after all the trouble. So, you feel sorry for them, don't you?" Xiao Mu's icy voice landed on Jing Linyao's heart word by word, causing her to involuntarily shudder all over. That seemed to be the case. But to be said so mercilessly like this, it was really irritating. With a wry smile, Jing Linyao summoned a long sword from her sense pool and said coldly, "Jing Linyao, please fight with the crown princess of the divine land." Arbor's eyes narrowed. With a swipe of her left hand, a thunderbolt sword that was flickering with purple light fell into her hand. Her fair little hand stroked the tip of the sword and gently flicked it. With a boom, it seemed to shatter everyone's ears. Even the swarm of fiery evil mosquitoes flying in the air couldn't help but retreat. Chapter 3406. A few days ago, her Spirit Division Record's Soul chapter had advanced to the 9th level, and her Spirit Meridians had formed a 9th branch meridian. As for the Technique chapter, she specifically practiced swordsmanship in order to complement the Thunderclap sword. Today, it just so happened that she was going to test out this extremely powerful Jing Linyao. Jing Linyao was a peak level 15 spiritual master with a level 8 spiritual fire. In the Divine Province, she could be considered a rather outstanding genius among women. However, the person she wanted to challenge today was Arbor, a little monster whose talent was close to monstrous. Jing Linyao took a deep breath, and the spirit sword in her hand was enveloped in a layer of fire. Her body suddenly moved, and she swept toward Arbor like a bolt of lightning. Bam! The two swords heavily collided. An enormous force radiated from Jing Linyao's arm. Jichen raised her brows slightly. On the side, Dao Wuji couldn't resist applauding and cheering. Good, good. Princess Jing's move is like splitting mountains and breaking seas. It's immensely powerful. Everyone simultaneously turned to glare at him. Which country was this dunce from? Dao Wuji rubbed his nose and glanced at Jichen ingratiatingly. Peach Blossom, I just feel that Princess Jing is evenly matched with the little crown princess. Cough, she's worthy of being the little crown princess's opponent. Everyone chuckled at him, then turned their heads to look at the field. In the billowing sandstorm in the barracks, two slender figures flew up and down, one on the left and one on the right. They had already exchanged over 100 moves. After exchanging blows with the little stoic, the more Jing Linyao fought, the more apprehensive she felt. This little stoic was young, but her attacks were very shrewd and ruthless. She didn't have any openings from head to toe. Moreover, she had only been using her sword up until now and hadn't used any other assistance. Although her cultivation was inferior to Jing Linyao's, her actual combat strength far surpassed Jing Linyao's. Jing Linyao involuntarily chuckled bitterly, thinking that she had already lost. However, people were like this. The moment before admitting defeat, Jing Linyao still wanted to fight one more time. Crown Princess, if Jing Linyao defeats you, are you willing to agree to my withdrawal? Arbor glanced at her coldly. What's so difficult about that? Jing Linyao was secretly delighted. Without another word, she summoned a fire spirit and pointed in Arbor's direction. Go! The tip of her sword suddenly spat out a tongue of flame, like a wriggling giant snake suddenly opening its mouth and biting towards Arbor. Arbor's eyes flickered. Suddenly, he raised the Thundercrash sword in his hand and activated the incantation. The first move of the Thundercrash technique of the 9th heaven fell. Hundreds of lightning bolts suddenly exploded at the same time, forming a dazzling reddish-purple wheel in front of him. With a speed comparable to light, it quickly swept toward the giant snake phantom that Jing Linyao had waved out. The giant snake suddenly shattered into pieces inside the wheel. The wheel carried the terrifying power of thunder and lightning as it smashed towards Jing Linyao, who was slightly opening her mouth in front of her. In an instant, Jing Linyao was like a kite with a broken string. She was sent flying by the wheel. She fell heavily on the dusty ground and ate a mouthful of hot sand. Her expression was still somewhat dull and sluggish. She had no idea what had happened at all. One move? Lost? Jing Linyao was slightly alarmed. She coughed several times and propped herself up, wanting to sit up. However, at this very moment, she suddenly discovered that the meridians in her body were moving slightly. A majestic spiritual energy surged out of her body and instantly sucked in the spiritual energy from all directions. She was startled and promptly sat cross-legged, a trace of excitement surfacing in her eyes. Chapter 3407. After her battle with the young crown princess, she had unintentionally broken through to the peak and was about to break through to the divine realm. This sudden joy instantly drowned Jing Linyao. The few remaining personal guards by her side hurriedly ran forward and looked at Arbor with vigilance, guarding against her sudden attack. The young crown princess only looked deeply at Jing Linyao and then called for everyone to head towards the sandy slope that Jing Linyao had mentioned. Right now, she was burning with worry and didn't have the energy to find trouble with Jing Linyao. He led his men and ran towards the sandy slope behind the barracks. At a glance, she saw that there were many soldiers from the Pride camp lying in ambush in front of the sandy slope. Xiao Mu waved her hand, and countless sand scorpions crawled over with rustling sounds. Whenever someone resisted, they would immediately surround that person and gnaw on them until not even their bones were left behind. When Jing Minyao saw that Arbor was chasing after them, she hurriedly carried Jolin, who was drooping her head, out from behind the slope. She hid behind a sand wall with a hole in it and looked at Arbor through the hole. Her voice was extremely sharp as she shouted at her, "Stop right there!" Arbor clenched her small fists and saw Jolin, who had fallen into Jing Minyao's hands. Jolin's body seemed to be limp and she seemed to be unconscious. "You're courting death!" Arbor exploded with a roar and terrifying spiritual energy erupted from her body. It was as if layers of huge waves were crashing towards the sandy slope. Bang, 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 bang. The sandy slope was swept up by the spiritual energy, forming a sandstorm that was half the height of a person. The sandstorm swept towards Wang Liming and her daughters. Jing Qiao's cultivation was lacking and she was the first to be knocked to the ground by the sandstorm. She spat out a mouthful of blood and her face was pale with fright. She lay there, not daring to move. So terrifying. Did the young crown princess want to kill the three of them? Wang Liming was also shocked and cried out in alarm, "Crown princess, is there a misunderstanding? Let's talk things out." Min Min, quickly release the crown prince consort's younger sister. You didn't capture her in the first place. Wang Liming was badly frightened and hurriedly reminded her daughter. She had personally seen the young crown princess ruthlessly execute her daughter back then. At this moment, she no longer dared to provoke this vicious and merciless crown prince consort. She was afraid that today's matter wouldn't end peacefully. Her Min Wang Liming's face darkened and her palms were sweating. She hoped that her master Jing Ming's return quickly. Master had a transcendent god realm cultivator by his side. That was their Jing clan's ancestor-level figure. As long as Old Master and that transcendent god realm cultivator rushed back, they would definitely be able to save Min Min's life. Yet Jing Minyao's eyes had already turned red from anger. She clutched Xiao Lin's neck and hooted at Xiao Mu, "If you don't stop, I'll break her neck immediately." Xiao Mu's eyes shot out wisps of venomous light, and she clenched her fists as she glared fixedly at Jing Minyao. She enunciated each word, "That, freeze. That." Whoosh! A stream of light flashed through the air and everyone felt their vision blur. When Jing Minyao looked up again, she was horrified to find that Arbor, who was originally far away, was now standing right in front of her. She was only 3 inches away from her. She placed a small hand on her arm, causing Jing Minyao to tremble. Chapter 3408. It was as if an ice-cold venomous snake had crawled up her arm. That hand was as hard and firm as jade. It was ice-cold and emitted a chill. Jing Minyao opened her mouth slightly and let out a suppressed cry. She felt as if the little crown princess' 5 fingers that were squeezing her arm were about to crush her bones. Those 5 fingers that were as hard as iron clamped down on her arm, forcing her to let go of Jolin's neck inch by inch. Then she was forced to raise her arm inch by inch. Wang Liming's frightened screams sounded in her ears. Jing Minyao discovered that her hand was uncontrollably bent in the opposite direction until it was stretched to an angle that could not be stretched any further. A crisp crack sounded in her ears. The bones in her arm were broken. A piercing pain spread to her brain, causing Jing Minyao to let out a blood-curdling scream. Min. Wang Liming was about to rush forward. However, the peony fairy quickly walked over and tapped her to the ground. "Big sister, you're wrong. Our Jojo is having a one-on-one duel with your daughter. How can you interfere and disregard the rules of the pugilistic world and come up to mess things up?" Wang Liming looked at Jing Minyao, who had fallen into Arbor's hands, in horror. She kept praying in her heart that her master would come back soon, come back soon, come back soon. Bam! Arbor ruthlessly punched Jing Minyao's nose. Wang Liming's eyes shrank in fear. She could clearly hear the sound of bones breaking coming from her daughter's face. Arbor reached out to take the limp Jolin and quickly checked her pulse. A trace of fury surged in her eyes. She stared coldly at Jing Minyao and coldly ordered, "Tie her up." Then she ignored her and directly carried Xiao Lin to the other side of the pit. She reached out and plucked a lustrous red bloodshed vermilion fruit from Paradise Planet. She took out a tray of holy water and placed the bloodshed vermilion fruit in it. Then she took out a small knife that was as thin as a cicada's wing and cut open the very thin vermilion fruit with extreme speed and technique. He dug out half of the fruit and tore it open to feed Xiao Lin. After that, he had her eat half a fruit and gave her a small bottle of healing medicine. Then, he reached out and massaged her chest and back for a while. He took out some silver needles and inserted them into several acupuncture points. "Sister Peony." "Go ahead, Jojo." The peony fairy ran to Arbor's side and looked at her with a smile. "Help me look after my sister. In another 4 hours, remember to feed the other half of the fruit to her for consumption. Let her eat the core when she wakes up." "All right." The peony fairy nodded vigorously. Then she picked up Xiao Lin and ran back to the ginkgo fairy and the others. With Peony and Ginkgo looking after Xiao Lin, Arbor naturally felt at ease. Her cold eyes turned to Jing Minyao, who was tied to the side, and she shouted, "Guards of the Crown Princess, listen up. Gather all the members of the Pangu clan. Drag Jing Minyao into their camp. This Crown Princess wants to do it in front of everyone in the Pangu clan. Deal with her personally." Wang Liming got up from the ground with great difficulty and shouted, "You dare!" "Do you think I dare?" Arbor looked at Wang Liming coldly. Then she waved her arm and shouted, "Tie her up." The purple forest guards swarmed forward and dragged Jing Minyao into the barracks like dragging a dead dog. Chapter 3409. Let go of me. Jing Minyao was dragged for a while. She turned around and saw the 2 consecrators who were tied up by vines and thrown to the side. Her eyes met Consecrator Zhang's, and she was so angry that her lungs were about to explode. Useless, all useless things. How could they not even beat Arbor? Consecrator Jiang was truly furious now. He now knew that such a big matter was caused by Jing Minyao's ignorance. If she hadn't captured his sister first, they wouldn't have been so bored as to come knocking on their door. Wasn't this entirely her own fault? Jing Minyao still had the face to glare at others now? Unrepentant. Consecrator Jiang also glared at Jing Minyao with a stern expression, his eyes so wide that they almost popped out of their sockets. "Arbor, I'm telling you, don't mess around." Jing Minyao angrily reprimanded, "My father will be back soon. If he sees you treat me like this, he definitely won't let you off. What are you doing? Don't you understand what I'm saying?" Jing Minyao glared at the 2 purple forest guards. "You still want to fight? Why don't you first consider whether you have the ability to withstand my father's anger before acting?" A slap. One of the purple forest guards couldn't take it anymore and gave Jing Minyao a backhand slap, successfully shutting her up. "You still dare to talk nonsense when you're about to die." The purple forest guard coldly glanced at her, then dragged her to a pillar and tied her up firmly, completely ignoring Jing Minyao's clamor. Jing Minyao was stunned for a few seconds by the purple forest guard's slap, then she screamed again, "Arbor! I won't accept it. Do you hear me? I won't accept it, I won't accept it. You must have used some kind of witchcraft just now. That's why you caught me off guard. I want to compete with you again. Let go of me. Do you dare to let go of me? Arbor." Jing Minyao felt that Arbor must have used some kind of powerful divine weapon to assist her. Otherwise, how could she appear in front of her in an instant, catching her off guard and subduing her? A thin vine as thick as a thumb shot out from Arbor's wrist, with thorns on it. Wang Liming was so frightened that her hair stood on end. She hurriedly took a few steps forward and knelt on the ground, crying and begging, "Crown Princess, please spare me." The Crown Princess. It's Min Min's fault for not being sensible. It's my fault for not disciplining her properly. That's why Min Min is so willful. But now, your sister hasn't been hurt too much. Could you please ask the crown princess for my sake? Xiao Mu swung her vine whip at her face with a backhand grip. Wang Liming rolled on the ground. Although her face avoided being hit by the vines, her shoulder was still hit. She felt the thorns tearing at her tender flesh and she grimaced in pain. Madam Jing, you don't know how to teach your daughter. This crown princess will help you. Xiao Mu berated expressionlessly. She then raised her wrist and lashed out several vine whips at Jing Minyao. Jing Minyao almost doubted life after being whipped by the barbed vine whip. She felt unbearable pain all over her body. From top to bottom, from head to toe, she couldn't help but tremble and twitch. Xiao Mu didn't stop there, continuously lashing out several dozen vine whips at Jing Minyao. Who gave you the guts to touch my sister? When you kidnapped my sister, you didn't think this day would come, did you? Chapter 34:10. Jing Minyao. I seem to have warned you before. I told you not to have any crooked thoughts and to stay away from me. I told you to know your place and behave yourself. You've turned a deaf ear to what I've said. Arbor whipped Jing Minyao's chest with her vine, causing the latter to let out a shrill scream. Arbor raised her vine whip slightly and lifted her chin. Her pair of beautiful eyes coldly stared at her, and she said indifferently, "Can you die a second time? Do you think you can come back from the dead this time?" Arbor leaned close to her ear and whispered, "I seem to have asked you before, do you want to die again? It seems that you've answered me perfectly with your actions." Jing Minyao shuddered slightly and looked at the expressionless little girl in front of her with a face full of fear. Her expression didn't change much from beginning to end, but in the bottom of her pair of eyes that were as black as a deep pool, terrifying saber light and sword shadows floated. "People of the Panga clan, listen up." Arbor's cold voice was raised in the sky above the rolling sand and clearly fell into everyone's ears. "Today, it was your Panga clan's third miss who captured this crown princess sister. In order to save her sister, this crown princess sent troops to your clan's land to exterminate the enemy. All of this was caused by the third miss of your clan. The entire sand was covered with heads, but no one dared to make the slightest sound." Arbor pointed her vine whip at the tied-up Jing Minyao and coldly said, "No one can leave unscathed after hurting my family. Warriors of the divine land, my brothers and sisters, let me ask you, how am I going to deal with this woman? What price do I want her to pay?" Xiao Mu's icy gaze brushed past Jing Minyao, who was trembling with her head bowed, and she suddenly raised her voice to ask, "Chop off her head. Chop off her head. Let her fall into the abyss of death for all eternity. Let her pay the price of blood." The price of blood. The Purple Forest guards shouted in unison. Although there were only 500 of them, their voices resounded throughout the 6 prefectures and 3 prefectures. Every word resounded in everyone's hearts, causing them to tremble in fear. Arbor raised his hand slightly, clenched his fingers into a fist, and raised it high. All the voices disappeared in an instant. Everyone present felt as if their hearts were being crushed. It was as if the source of all the words they wanted to say had been extinguished. Jing Minyao abruptly raised her head and glared at Arbor. She violently twisted her bound body and screamed, "Arbor! Arbor!" "It's not Min Min's fault." Wang Liming scrambled over and stood in front of Jing Minyao. She cried out miserably, "It's really not Min Min's fault. Min Min, tell me the truth. Quickly tell the crown princess that you didn't kidnap the crown princess sister. You didn't do it." Jing Minyao seemed to have thought of something and laughed out loud. She glared at Arbor with resentment and said coldly, "You think you'll be fine after saving your sister? Ha! I'll tell you the truth. The one who threw your sister into my hands is someone else." Xiao Mu dashed forward and ruthlessly kicked Wang Liming aside. She then grabbed Jing Minyao's collar, her eyes emitting a chilly glint. "Speak. What do you mean?" She didn't know why, but there was an inexplicable panic in her heart, as if something bad was about to happen. Chapter 34:11. Speak. What do you mean? From Wang Liming's tone, it seemed like Jolin wasn't captured by Jing Minyao. Then why did she appear in the Pangu clan's territory? Crown Princess, Crown Princess. Wang Liming hurriedly crawled forward and wailed loudly. Min really didn't capture him. Oh Min, don't argue with the Crown Princess. Hurry up and tell me everything you know. The Crown Princess is reasonable and will definitely have her own judgment when the time comes. Arbor looked coldly at Wang Liming and didn't answer her. Wang Liming, this woman, was truly laughable. Did she think that she would let her off after Jing Minyao revealed the truth? Was there such an easy thing in this world? Arbor loosened her fingers, and her gaze landed coldly on Jing Minyao. Are you going to confess yourself, or do you want me to help you? Jing Minyao laughed heartily until she was out of breath. When that person threw your sister to me, he said, that person also said, when he threw your sister to me. He said that their people went to the lower star domain's Sikong planet to visit your adoptive parents. Ha! Arbor, are you surprised? Are you pleasantly surprised? Some ants from the lower star domain. Take a guess. How long can they resist? Arbor glanced at her indifferently. Sikong planet is restricted by heavenly Tao. Even if they go down, their cultivation will only be suppressed. It's already pretty good that they can reach peak mystic cultivator. So what? Peak mystic cultivator, that's enough to deal with your family, right? Ha! Enough to deal with? Arbor couldn't help but sneer at her. But Jing Minyao didn't sense the coldness in her eyes. She was blindly immersed in her own world. When she thought of what that person said to her, she felt agitated for no reason. So what if the little crown princess was arrogant? Wasn't she still destined to be suppressed for the rest of her life? She didn't believe that this woman would still dare to be so arrogant after capturing her family members. Arbor continued to stare at her expressionlessly. After a while, he spat out a cold sentence, hold down this woman's limbs and chop off her head. I want to let everyone know clearly. How dare you attack my family in Arbor? This is what you deserve. No. Wang Liming crawled forward in a panic and screamed, Crown Princess, you can't do this. You can't. Take her down. Arbor pointed at Wang Liming and ordered. The purple forest guards immediately swarmed forward, grabbing the wailing Madame Jing and forcing her to kneel on the ground. Wang Liming's entire body was pressed down, and she barely managed to raise her head. Her lips trembled as she shouted, Crown Princess! You can't be this rude. The Pangu clan has always been living in seclusion. You are trying to raise a war between the two clans by doing this. There will be no war. Arbor coldly interrupted her. He stared at her coldly and said word by word, all of you will die. Wang Liming's expression froze. She struggled with all her might and screamed, what right do you have to punish us? My husband is on his way back. You're such an unreasonable woman. What a vicious mind you have. Are you trying to make my husband declare war on the divine prefecture? Xiao Mu looked at her disdainfully before lightly raising her hand. Immediately, a purple forest guard stepped forward with a cold face and held down Jing Minyao, who was struggling with all her might. At this moment, Jing Minyao finally felt a little afraid. She finally felt that the situation was not good. Chapter 34:12. She couldn't help but yell, Are you all dead? Come and save me. Do it. Following Jing Minyao's shouts, the sand field fell silent. No one made a sound. It was so quiet that even a pin drop could be heard. All the members of the Pangu clan were now glaring at the willful third miss with fury. They had heard everything the Crown Princess of the Divine Land had said just now. If this brainless woman hadn't kidnapped someone else's sister, why would they have led their people to attack the Pangu clan's territory? Damn it, she still had the face to order people around. Who would be willing to listen to her? Moreover, what the third young miss said just now had refreshed their opinion of the third young miss's stupidity. They didn't expect that there would be such a stupid person in the world who was willing to stick her neck out for others. She clearly knew that the other party had thrown the Crown Princess's sister here for no good reason, but she was still stupid enough to take on this hot potato? Princess Jing was such a brilliant and intelligent woman. How could she have such a foolish and ignorant sister? Wang Liming hurriedly crawled forward and rushed to Reverend Jiang and Reverend Lon. She urged loudly, "Reverend Jiang, Reverend Lon, you are the two reverends of the Panga clan. Master usually provides you with the best resources. Now that Minyao's life is at stake, you can't just stand by and watch." Reverend Jiang turned a deaf ear to Wang Liming's words. He even glanced at her and gave her a cold smile. Reverend Lon was a kinder person. He couldn't help but sigh. He signaled Wang Liming to look at their tied-up bodies. He smiled bitterly and said, "It's useless, Madame Jing. Don't waste your time on us brothers. We are no match for the crown princess and her people. If you have the time, why don't you listen to your daughter's last words?" "Who are those people?" The two old brothers simply couldn't see through the realms of the handsome red-clothed man and his companions beside the crown prince consort. With such a great disparity in strength, there was no way they could win. Madame Jing was really indulging in fantasy. As he spoke, Jing Minyao was already pinned to the ground by two purple forest guards. One of them drew a sword from his waist and looked at her coldly. Without saying a word, he slashed towards her head. "Spare him!" A deep voice came from the sky. Everybody raised their eyes, only to see Jing Ti, the chief of the Panga clan, returning with an old man whose hair and beard were all white. Jing Minyao was pressed to the ground and was trembling. When she saw the two of them, her eyes couldn't help but light up. "Father, father! Grandpa Zhu, help me! Help me kill this little bitch!" A purple forest guard viciously smacked her on the head, causing her to fall heavily onto the sandy ground. She choked on a mouthful of hot sand, causing her to cough repeatedly. "Who are you?" "Quickly release Min Min." That elderly man that Jing Minyao called Grandpa Zhu berated with a cold frown and a furious glare. His entire body suppression suddenly dispersed as he charged straight for Qiao Mu. Ma Shurchen, who had been waving her small fan and watching the show with a smile, suddenly turned cold. In a flash, she arrived at Arbor's side. She opened her fan and lightly waved it. A sharp, cold light shot towards the old man. "What a shameless old thing! How dare you bully my Jojo?" The venerable Peach Blossom Immortal coldly scolded. Chapter 34:13. He pointed at the old man and sent out a beam of saint power that rushed toward the old man whose expression had changed slightly. The old man took a deep breath and shouted, "Who are you?" He hurriedly pulled out a saber from his conscience and held it in front of his chest. The moment the two collided, a surging force hit the back of the old man's saber. The collision caused his chest to tighten slightly, and his entire body to stumble back over a dozen steps before he managed to stabilize his body. The old man's expression changed. Jing Zai, the Panga clan leader, also had a sharp look in his eyes. There was a hint of disbelief in his cold, electric eyes. He was too surprised. He knew Elder Zhu's strength better than anyone else. He was at the peak of the spiritual supreme realm and a transcendent god realm expert. But now, this young man, who looked to be in his early 20s, had pushed him back a few steps with one finger? What was going on? Why was his opponent's cultivation level higher than Elder Zhu's? Qiao Mu blinked, a cold glint in her eyes. She gazed at the old man across from her and said after a while, "You're so shameless." Elder Zhu's face flushed red. He stared at Arbor with gloomy eyes. If looks could kill, Lord Jojo would have been killed by this old man many times. Yuan Shurchen couldn't help but look back at the little girl. He raised his hand and patted her little head. "Jojo, how do you think we should deal with this old man?" Arbor said expressionlessly, "He's a hindrance." "Then let me kill him." The venerable Peach Blossom Immortal laughed. He moved his finger, and a natal divine sword appeared in his palm. Without a word, he waved a beam of sword light at Elder Zhu. Elder Zhu's expression changed again. As he opened his defensive spiritual weapon, he grabbed the saber and rushed forward. The two of them soared into the sky and exchanged several blows in an instant. Elder Zhu was no match for them. Blood trickled out of his mouth, and he was shocked. Jing Zong was also secretly anxious. After all, from the looks of it, Elder Zhu wasn't a match for the beautiful man in red beside the crown princess. As time passed, Elder Zhu from his side would definitely lose. Jing Jia was anxious to save his daughter. He glanced at Jing Minyao, who was pressed on the ground, and then turned to Arbor. "Crown Princess, I beg you to have your men stop immediately. The 100,000 soldiers that I brought back with me have already surrounded this place. You can release your spiritual sense and take a good look to see if I'm lying to you or not." Little Tai Sui's body moved, and in the blink of an eye he was in front of Jing Jia. He leaped up and grabbed Jing Jia's neck. While Jing Ting was retreating, countless bodyguards around him rushed forward to protect him. Little Tai Sui smacked several people in a row, and in just a few minutes, it had arrived in front of Jing Ting. "Even if I, Jing Ting, am captured by you, I will fight until the last moment. Even if there is only one soldier left, without my order, the 100,000 soldiers of the Panga clan will fight you to the death." Xiao Mu coldly stared at clan head Jing Ting and snorted. "You probably aren't a fool, are you?" As he spoke, roars of fighting could be heard from outside the camp. Jing Ting's expression changed. He tried his best to calm his mind. Just as he was about to use his spiritual sense to check what was happening outside, he heard an extremely cold voice. "Clan leader Jing, let me give you a piece of advice. Tell them to surrender immediately. Otherwise, die." Chapter 34:14. At this moment, all the hot blood in Jing Jue's heart receded. The blood in his body almost turned into ice and snow, as if it was about to freeze inside his body. He was so cold that his teeth were chattering. He really didn't expect this at all. The crown prince of the Divine Province had also rushed over, and from the looks of it, he had brought an army. Jing Jue closed his eyes slightly. The thought of exhausting the little crown princess with the advantage of numbers suddenly disappeared without a trace. "Clan leader Jing, are you going to sacrifice so many of our clansmen for your daughter?" A Panga woman couldn't help but stand up and scream at Jing Jue. "Jing Minyao is such a jinx. How many people is she going to kill?" "Kill Jing Minyao! Kill Jing Minyao! Kill Jing Minyao!" A voice rang out. The Panga clansmen all said the same thing at the same time. Their voices soared into the sky and stretched for thousands of miles. Wang Liming waved her hands with a pale face and roared at the crowd, "Are you even human? You can't be so selfish. You can't let my daughter die just to appease the crown princess's anger. Kill Jing Minyao! Kill Jing Minyao!" The roars rose and fell one after another without any intention of stopping. Some of the Panga clansmen were even about to rush forward with knives, wanting to kill Jing Minyao on the spot to claim the credit. Jing Jue signaled with his eyes, and two guards immediately ran over and beat the two Panga clansmen who wanted to attack Jing Minyao to the ground. Wang Liming's face grew paler and paler. She hurriedly turned back to look at clan leader Jing. "Master, what should we do?" Jing Jue's heart was also cold. He didn't expect that the first to betray him would be his clansmen. They must have been scared to death by the little crown princess, right? That was why they wanted to use Jing Minyao's death to end this war. It wasn't that they were wrong, but Jing Jue felt extremely indignant. Since when had he, Jing Mao, been forced into such a state? "Clan leader Jing, do you want to continue fighting or execute your daughter to protect yourself and your people? You have to choose quickly." Arbor said coldly, "Your people outside can't wait for your decision." The sounds of fighting outside the camp grew louder and louder. Jing Ting held his breath as he heard a series of arrows being fired. A lot of members of the Panga clan must have been killed or wounded outside. Bang! The door of the camp that was wrapped in vines was kicked open by someone. Everyone looked up and saw a handsome man clad in pitch-black divine armor. He kicked open the door of the two corpses beside him and walked in quickly with a frosty expression on his face. He raised his phoenix eyes and looked coldly at Jing. His words were clear and cold. "Does clan leader Jing want to fight with this crown prince? The blood sea of hell is waiting for you to cross it." Mo Lien stared at him coldly. Her voice was emotionless and cold. "The bones on the ground are your future." Jing Jue couldn't help but cry out, "Your Highness, the Panga clan has no intention of being the enemy of the divine land. I'm willing to hand over my daughter and the culprit. You can punish her however you want." Bang! Elder Zhu fell from the sky, but he didn't land safely. Instead, he was kicked down from the sky and hit the ground hard. His head was bleeding. Chapter 34:15. Jing Minyao's eyes widened as she turned to her father in disbelief. These words actually came from her father who had always doted on her? But how did the situation turn out like this? Shouldn't her father be here to save her? Even Elder Zhu, who was at the transcendent realm, was knocked to the ground. Seeing him climb up with a defeated expression, Jing Minyao felt a bone-chilling coldness in her chest. Was she being abandoned by her father? No, this couldn't be real. She must still be in a dream and hadn't fully woken up. Jing Minyao's eyes were bloodshot as she looked anxiously at her father, Jing Zhi. She screamed, "Father, father! Father! You can't do this!" Madame Jing also cried as she rushed over. She knelt at Jing Zhui's feet and gripped his robe tightly as she cried, "Master, master, I beg you." Minmin was just confused for a moment and made such a mistake. She knows her mistake now. She knows her mistake, master. Please give her one more chance. Just give her one more chance. Madame Jing cried out in a heart-wrenching manner. Jing Zhui looked at his daughter who was covered in blood and was in a sorry state. Naturally, he felt very uncomfortable. This daughter used to be the daughter that he valued and loved the most. Compared to his coldness and sternness towards his eldest daughter, Jing Zhui was completely devoted to his youngest daughter. He was really afraid that she would fall in his hands and melt in his mouth. Usually, he would give her whatever she wanted and dote on her with all his might. However, in the end, was he going to personally send her to her death? Now, facing the Crown Prince's army in the Aurora Desert and facing the Crown Princess' aggression, Jing Zhui was helpless. He turned to look at Arbor and saw the latter looking at him coldly. There was no room for negotiation. Jing Zhui sighed and lowered his head to Madame Jing. "Madame, let go." "No, I won't let go. I won't let go." Madame Jing screamed. "Min Min is my daughter. I won't leave her to die." "Jing Zhui, she's your daughter too. Are you willing to send your own daughter to her death just to appease the Crown Princess?" He couldn't accept it. Jing Zha's eyes turned red too. But what could he do if he didn't want to? Can you change the current situation just because you're unwilling? He could either execute Jing Minyao or drag the entire clan down with him. These were the two paths before him. No matter what choice he made, he still felt extremely uncomfortable. "Old master!" Madame Jing screamed and turned to glare at Arbor. "Crown Princess, your sister is completely fine right now. Why do you have to be so overbearing and want my Min Min to die?" Xiao Mu gazed coldly at this unreasonable woman in front of her and ruthlessly slapped her across the face from a distance. "My sister is fine now, but it's not because you were merciful to her. It's because she was lucky," Arbor said coldly. Furthermore, was Shaolin really all right? She was hit in the chest and her organs were injured. If she hadn't appeared in time to help, it would have been worse. Even if she was cured in the future, there would be repercussions. "Crown Prince Consort, you're twisting words and forcing logic by saying this." Madame Jing's voice was very shrill as she turned around and crawled to Emolyen's feet. Chapter 34:16. Madame Jing cried miserably, Your Highness, please have mercy and save Min Min's life. Isn't it unfair for the Crown Princess to do this? Is it completely reasonable for her to do this?" Prince Emo looked at her coldly. It was this cold look that made Madame Jing feel as if she had fallen into an ice cellar. The Crown Prince didn't care about the life and death of the mother and daughter at all. That's right, if the Crown Prince had any pity for Min Min, he wouldn't have led the army to attack the Panga clan. Min Min must be blind to fall in love with someone like you. Madame Jing's anger exploded in an instant. She cursed fiercely, her eyes glaring at him as if she wanted to eat him up. At this moment, she was indeed very angry. If Min Min hadn't been bewitched by Jing Linyao and fell in love with the Crown Prince wholeheartedly and wanted to replace Jing Linyao as the Crown Princess of the Divine Land, how could there have been so many subsequent incidents? She hated Jing Linyao, but now she hated this cold and heartless Crown Prince even more. Impudent. The Purple Forest Guard suddenly drew his sword and pressed it against Madame Jing's neck. His eyes were filled with anger, as if the woman in front of him had tarnished the supreme deity in their hearts. How dare you be so rude to the crown prince? Do you want to die? Xiao Mu also narrowed her eyes and very rudely scolded back. You're so shameless. Who asked your daughter to like Jojo's lotus? Scram scram scram. Who allowed your daughter to like Jojo's lotus? What a ridiculous woman. Was she born with no brains? Mo Lien blinked, and he cheerfully strode to his wifey's side. He reached out to grasp her small hand and said with a nod and a smile, Xiao Xiao, don't get angry over this kind of idiot. After we settle the matter here, we'll go for a stroll around Clear Pass City. Xiao Mu turned to look at him and nodded her small head. Just now, he was really angered by Wang Liming. She didn't know what nonsense she was talking about, as if it was Lien's fortune to be liked by her daughter. In fact, Jojo's lotus didn't know this Jing Minyao at all. She hadn't even interacted with this woman twice. Moreover, even if he had seen her, he would only glance at her coldly from afar. He would not even spare her a glance. She really didn't know how this crazy woman could blame Jojo's lotus for not knowing how to educate her own daughter. Mrs. Jing was stopped by the sword, but she was still shrieking and making a scene because she loved her daughter dearly. The divine land is indeed powerful, but the Pengu clan is not a pushover either. If you really want to force my Min Min to death, I will fight you to the death. Neither of us, Your Highness, Crown Princess, please don't lower yourself to her level. Jingzhe interrupted Madame Jing's words. He then cupped his hands toward Arbor and glanced at the guards standing at the side. Why aren't you dragging Madame away? Jingzhe shouted angrily, don't you think you've caused enough trouble? Did they not see that all the members of the Pengu clan were staring at her in disgust when they heard that she was going to fight to the death? No one would accompany her to her death. Because no one wanted to die. Why should they throw away their lives for a Jing Minyao? She, Jing Minyao, still wanted them to risk their lives for her stupidity and arrogance. Chapter 34:17. Ha, what a joke! Jing Zhui frowned. He glanced at the unfriendly faces of his clansmen and sighed heavily in his heart. If his wife continued to be so willful, even he, the clan leader, would lose a lot of people's support. By then, it would be even more difficult to win back the hearts of his clansmen. Let go! Let go of me! Madame Jing screamed and struggled with all her might. She turned around and glared at her husband viciously. She couldn't help but curse, Jingzhu, you useless man! You don't even care about your own wife and daughter. Jingzhu, don't forget what you promised me back then. You promised me that you would take good care of Min Min and me. Jingzhu. Clan leader Jing narrowed his eyes and looked at Madame Jing coldly. He didn't say anything for a long time. He just watched indifferently as his clansmen tied up Madame Jing and dragged her away. Madame Jing's screams echoed in the air and lingered for a long time. She was like a plucked pheasant that let out a series of sharp screams before it died. Xiao Mu reflexively furrowed her brows. Her screams had clearly pierced her ears and made her feel very uncomfortable. Clan leader Jing. Emolian looked back at Jing Jia and asked coldly, you can start dealing with her now, right? Jing Zhui's 5 fingers clenched tightly. His heart felt like it was being squeezed by an invisible hand. It was so heavy that he couldn't speak. Father! Father! Jing Minyao screamed anxiously. Her eyes were filled with a strong desire to live. She knew fear now. She knew that although she was the 3rd daughter of the Pengu clan, she was still nothing in front of the crown prince and the crown princess of the divine land. If others were to pinch her to death, it would be like pinching a weak little ant to death. They could casually stretch out a hand and lightly press down, and she would be deader than dead. Clan leader Jing? Mo Lien reminded him impatiently. Jing Zhui's face was heavy. Finally, he nodded silently. Guards. Immediately, 2 members of the Pengu clan walked forward, each holding a sharp dagger. Jing Minyao's pupils shrank. She couldn't help but tremble violently. That terrifying memory once again drowned her like an avalanche. She couldn't help but tremble. She remembered the day Arbor had cut her neck with a dagger. She thought of the terrible pain when she was reborn, The pain where she could neither live nor die. She thought of the painful days after she came back from the dead. Her limbs were weak and she couldn't move. She couldn't eat anything and could only drink liquids. She also thought about how she had tried her best to grow and strengthen herself, but it had been so difficult. She had finally used a secret technique to raise herself to a level 3 god tier master, but in the eyes of others, she was still just an ant. She hated it. He hated them so much that he couldn't extricate himself. He hated them so much that he wanted to devour everyone in front of him. They were her father, her mother, her sisters, and her clansmen. However, none of them stood by her side, and none of them were willing to help her. Jing Minyao let out a shrill scream. She was forced to kneel on the ground. Her eyes were red. She shook her head and cried bitterly, "Father, Father, I know I was wrong. Don't kill me, Father. Father." Chapter 34:18. Jing Zai naturally closed his eyes in extreme pain, but the hatred in his heart towards the young couple in front of him could not be stopped. If there was a chance in the future, Jing Zhui secretly suppressed the hatred in his heart and turned his head to look into the distance. He could not bear to look at his daughter again. Seeing her father like this, Jing Minyao knew that this coward had completely given up on her. To put it nicely, he was doing it for the lives of the entire clan. To put it bluntly, he was doing it for his own future and life. In his eyes, no one was more important than her. Jing Minyao gritted her teeth in hatred. She suddenly raised her head and slapped a clansman in the abdomen, sending him flying. The dagger also fell to the ground with a clang. Jing Zhui suddenly turned his face to look at her. His eyes were cold. Just as he was about to explode, he heard a clansman cry out in horror. "Not good. The earth tornado is coming." The earth tornado was the most fatal disaster in the Aurora Desert. Looking from afar, the entire desert was blown up by a gust of wind, raising a tornado that went straight between the sky and the earth. The earth tornado moved so fast that it almost swept through the entire camp in the blink of an eye. The crowd was suddenly in chaos. Arbor reacted quickly. She first ordered Sapling to take back the little sand scorpion, the fiery evil mosquito, and the explosive bird. Looking at the members of the Panga clan who were wailing in despair inside the earth tornadoes, Xiao Mu unexpectedly frowned. She suddenly threw away the storage talisman in her hand and took the old, weak, women, and children into it. This was only temporary. There were at least tens of thousands of old, weak, women, and children here. A purple storage talisman was more than enough, but it was a little cramped in comparison. She had to save her own life first. While Arbor was doing this, her small body had already been carried away by Emolien. The group hid in the defensive barrier set up by the venerable Peach Blossom Immortal, Little Tai Sui, and the others, so they were not oppressed by the earth tornado for the time being. Separated by the transparent defensive boundary, Xiao Mu curiously gazed at the earth tornadoes wreaking havoc outside. For a moment, he didn't have the time to pay attention to Jing Minyao, who had fallen to the ground. Her entire body was twisted and turned by the earth tornado as she bumped into the wind. Jing Minyao was blown into the sky by the earth tornado. She landed on the sand with a thud and choked on a mouthful of sand. Her face turned red and she coughed violently. She hurriedly calmed herself down and created a defensive barrier against the wind. Unfortunately, her defensive barrier was only halfway up when she felt a surge of power behind her, hitting her in the back and sending her flying several meters away. Little Tai Sui narrowed its eyes and put down its hand. As Jing Minyao spat out a mouthful of blood, her body was once again swept up by the earth tornado and thrown into the sky. Arbor finally saw Jing Minyao's figure clearly. She was tossing about in the sky. The earth tornado tore her apart, and Arbor only saw a rain of blood sprinkling down. Jing Minyao was thrown to the ground and smashed out a big pit. Cough, cough, cough. Jing Minyao fell to the sand and was horrified to find that one of her arms had been removed by the earth tornado. Like a pitiful insect, she struggled to crawl on the ground, shaking her body as she crawled toward the feet of the Jing family head. "Father, save me, father, save me." She reached out and grabbed his robes, her other hand tugging at him as she begged him bitterly. The Jing family head closed his eyes. This daughter of his had lost an arm and was completely useless. Chapter 34:19. But to let her die like this, it seemed a bit reluctant. Jing Jia lowered his head and glanced at Jing Minyao's severed arm. Just as he was about to reach out and help her up, the earth tornado suddenly swept over again and slammed into the defensive wall he had built. Jing Jia had no choice but to use his hand to push Jing Minyao away and quickly stabilize himself. At the same time, Jing Minyao was once again swept up by the violent earth tornado, flying high into the sky with a whoosh. Jing Minyao's eyes bulged as she cried out in alarm, "Father!" Ugh. The earth tornado seemed to have gone crazy, rolling Jing Minyao up and down in the sky, constantly jolting her up and down. It kept tossing her around until she wished she could lower her head and vomit. But she was in the air and had just been hit by someone else. Not only was her internal energy in a mess, she couldn't even generate the strength to open her defensive barrier. Arbor turned his head to look at little Tai Sui. That child's movements were too fast. He slapped Jing Minyao's back and immediately slapped her into the earth tornado. Then he turned around as if nothing had happened, but this time, Jing Minyao could only blame her bad luck for being swept into the earth tornado. Little Tai Sui didn't attack her again. It was as if the earth tornado had its eyes on her and wanted to sweep her up into the sky, but it made sense. On this sandy land, besides Jojo's group, there were only Jing Minyao, clan head Jing, and other personal guards. The rest of the old, weak, women, and children had all been thrown into the storage talisman by Arbor. Jing Minyao was now wandering in the sky, tossed up and down by the earth tornado again and again. Several times it seemed like she was going to fall, but in the end she didn't fall. Wang Liming's hair was disheveled as she struggled to break free from clan head Jing's personal guards. She rushed forward and wailed, "Min Min, my Min Min." She rushed to Jing Jia, wanting to reach out and shake his body, but Jing Jia's defensive barrier blocked her outside. Madame Jing looked at him absent-mindedly and couldn't help but cry, clan head, please save Min Min, my daughter. My poor daughter." At this time, Jing Qiao also hurried to catch up with her mother. She pretended to shed 2 drops of tears. "Mother, don't be sad. Min Min is blessed by the heavens. She will definitely be fine." "How could he be fine?" Wang Liming turned around and glared at Jing Qiao. She couldn't help but scold, "You make it sound so simple. How could he be fine? Can't you see that your sister is bouncing back and forth in the sky? That damned earth tornado, why did it target her Min Min? Why didn't he roll anyone else but her Min Min to play with?" This made Wang Liming furious, but there was nothing she could do to help. Looking at her Min Min suffering in the air, Wang Liming felt like her heart was about to bleed. "Min Min, my Min Min," Wang Liming cried. "Mother." Jing Qiao hated that she couldn't grind her teeth. They were both her mother's biological daughters, but her mother treated her so differently. Usually, she was only good to Min Min and never cared about her biological daughter. It was fine if her mother wasn't close to her eldest sister. After all, her eldest sister wasn't her biological daughter. But she was different from her eldest sister. She was also her mother's biological daughter, okay? Why was it that ever since she was born, she had always been despised by her mother? Chapter 34:20. But Min Min had always been doted on by her mother. The anger in Jing Qiao's heart had already reached its peak. She could not help but shake off Wang Liming's hand and raise her voice. "Mother, why do you only have Min Min in your heart? I'm your daughter too. Aren't you worried that I'll be swept up into the sky by the earth tornado?" Wang Liming was furious. She raised her hand and slapped Jing Qiao's face. "Evil daughter. The one being swept up into the sky by the earth tornado is Min Min. The one suffering is Min Min, not you. Why are you shouting at your mother? You want Min Min to die so badly, don't you?" Wang Liming glared angrily at her eldest daughter. She did not hide the disappointment and hatred in her eyes. Jing Qiao suddenly couldn't stand still. She did not expect her mother to hate her so much. They were both her biological daughters. Why was there such a difference? How could Wang Liming care about Jing Qiao's feelings? She pushed her away with a look of disdain and said coldly, Get out of my way. She turned around, wanting to break Jingjia's defense barrier. But when she turned around, she met Jingjia's merciless eyes. That's right, Old Master had already given up on Min Min. At this moment, why would he risk his life for Min Min's sake? She was the only one who could save Min Min. She was the only one who could save her daughter. Wang Liming chased after the earth tornado with flying steps, screaming for her daughter at the top of her lungs. Xiao Mu couldn't resist taking a few more glances at her affectionate motherly face. The feelings of every mother in the world were probably the same. If the one swept up by the earth tornado at this moment was him, his mother, Wei Ziqin, would probably also be so anxious that she wanted to cry but had no tears. Arbor was stunned. She tilted her head and thought for a while. The earth tornado had already swept Jing Min Yao far away. The venerable Peach Blossom Immortal and the rest removed the defense barrier around them. The little fellow tilted her head and stared blankly into the distance without saying a word. Ichen frowned and couldn't help but flick her head. What are you thinking about, Jojo? What's there to think about this kind of woman who's too kind and spoils her son? Spoiling a child is like killing a child. This kind of woman is not desirable. Ma Shichen snorted and said, That's right, if it wasn't for Wang Liming spoiling her daughter so much, causing Jing Minyao to be domineering and arrogant, thinking that she was invincible and unparalleled in the world, the situation wouldn't be like this today. Mo Lien understood this little fellow, who was letting her imagination run wild, too well. He knew what she was thinking right now, so he whispered into her ear. Mother is not a woman like Wang Liming. Mother has taught you in Shaolin, so well. She's knowledgeable, gentle, and kind. She's different from them. Everyone was speechless. Your Highness, don't you feel guilty saying this? After Mo Lien finished speaking, she realized that there was only silence around her. She turned her head to look at Hu Jiechen and the others, who had a faint smile on their faces, and glared at them. What are you doing? Did she say something wrong? Was Jojo not good? Jojo was so good. None of them were allowed to laugh at Jojo. Cough, let's go and take a look. Hu Jiechen coughed to hide the smile at the corner of his mouth. After saying that, he stepped forward and chased in the direction of the earth tornado. Arbor asked in confusion, She's already been dealt with by the heavens. Why are you still chasing after her? Chapter 34:21. In any case, the earth tornado had already swept her far away. After a few rounds of torment, she probably wouldn't be alive. She couldn't be bothered to chase after her. She just wanted to see what would happen to this woman. She really had no interest in Jing Minyao's life or death. Mo Lien rubbed her small head, his eyes overflowing with gentleness. Silly Qiao Qiao, have you forgotten that there is still the Soul Congregation bell? Upon hearing this, Qiao Mu's eyes suddenly brightened. You're saying that the Soul Congregation bell is with Jing Minyao? Mo Lien nodded. Looking at how much Clan Head Jing and Madame Jing doted on her, I'm afraid it's true. Then what were they waiting for? Let's chase after them and take a look. Arbor hurriedly tugged at her husband's sleeve and ran after the venerable Peach Blossom Immortal. The venerable Peach Blossom Immortal had already drifted some distance away. He looked back and saw a large group of people following behind him. He couldn't help but call out, What are you all waiting for? Hurry up. Mo Lien held Jojo's little hand and sped up, flying to Hu Shichen's side. The two of them had already spread out their divine senses and determined the direction of the earth tornado. At this moment, they looked at each other and quickly rushed in the same direction. The group was very fast and caught up with Wang Liming's group in a flash. Wang Liming had already taken off her outer robe and was wearing a tight-fitting black shirt. Jing Minyao was lying not far away from her. She was half sprawled on the ground, gasping for breath. Wang Liming took out an elixir from her space ring. She was about to feed her daughter when she turned back and saw Mo Lien and the others chasing after them. Alarm bells rang in her heart. She hurriedly grabbed her daughter and ran away. However, at this moment, the earth tornado that had gone far away suddenly swept over from afar like a mischievous child. Arbor and the others were dumbfounded. After all, this earth tornado was a little strange. It had previously wreaked havoc and left after torturing Jing Minyao to the brink of death. But now, it suddenly turned around and swept over again. Coincidentally, Wang Liming saw Arbor and the others and was in a hurry to escape with her daughter. As a result, the mother and daughter came face to face with the earth tornado. All of a sudden, they were swept up by the earth tornado and thrown into the sky again. Arbor looked at Mo Lien Yuan Shurchen and the others speechlessly. What happened? Could it be that this earth tornado knows Jojo? Everlasting Blade could not help but ridicule. Just now, when the earth tornado rushed over, anyone with eyes could clearly see that it was deliberately avoiding Jojo. Thus, strictly speaking, from the very beginning, this earth tornado didn't even collide with the defensive barrier set up by Ji Chen and the others. This earth tornado was created by Heavenly Dao? Everyone couldn't resist asking curiously as they looked at Arbor oddly. Lady Xiqiao could not help but lower her head to look at herself. Her gaze swept up and down her body, but she did not find anything wrong with her. I don't recognize it. When Mo Lien heard this, she couldn't resist bursting out in laughter. Jojo, this little oddball, was too comical. What did he mean by, I don't recognize it? Who could be that earth tornado's relative? Yuan Shurchen chuckled and couldn't resist rubbing the little stoic's head with an icy expression. Heavenly Dao is definitely your relative. Chapter 34:22. That's right, it must be Jojo's relative. Otherwise, why would it always avoid Sir Jojo so harmoniously whenever there was a crisis? It must be because Sir Jojo was Heavenly Dao's relative. And he was a close relative. Arbor looked at the people in front of him in a daze, thinking that their thinking was a little weird. Who could be relatives with the illusory Heavenly Dao? How ridiculous! While everyone was talking, Wang Liming had already been spat out by the earth tornado and landed on the ground with a bang. That earth tornado seemed to despise Wang Liming very much and liked to toss around Jing Minyao alone. Wang Liming looked up at her daughter who was floating up and down in the earth tornado and screaming miserably from time to time. Her eyes were red from the pain and she couldn't stop screaming. Damn heavens, come at me if you have anything. Let go of my min. Bam. Jing Minyao was thrown down from the sky like a lump of rotten meat by the earth tornado and landed heavily on the ground. Wang Liming crawled over with tears in her eyes and carefully reached out to hold her daughter's head. She reached out to check her daughter's breathing and couldn't help but wail miserably. Min, my Min. Min. She wasn't breathing? Arbor blinked and then seemed to think of something and said softly, could it be that because Jing Minyao came back from the dead and went against the heavens, Heavenly Dao finally thought of taking care of her, so it did this? Maybe it was because Heavenly Dao didn't have time before. Sir Jojo said with a straight face. Jojo, what you said makes so much sense. Qi Xianxian and the rest looked at her, not knowing whether to laugh or cry. Seeing her serious expression and that she deliberately lowered her voice to speak to them mysteriously, they couldn't help but have the urge to burst out laughing. Yes, Heavenly Dao's memory isn't very good. The corner of Yuan Shurchen's mouth twitched as she said, previously, it forgot to take care of Jing Minyao. Now, taking advantage of this earth tornado, it suddenly remembered to take care of her. Arbor, originally, he didn't think that he was exaggerating, but after Yuan Shurchen described it so vividly, why did it feel like he was a little brainless idiot? But Arbor retracted his gaze. His face was tense as he suddenly pointed forward. What's that in her hand? Wang Liming laid on her daughter's body and cried for a while. Then she took out a small bell the size of a thumb from her ring. After the small bell appeared in her palm, it immediately jumped into the air. Following a series of crisp bell chimes, the bell grew larger with each chime. It wasn't until it became several zhang large that its shadow was able to completely cover Jing Minyao, who was lying on the ground. Only then did it let out a crisp sound and stopped moving in midair. Arbor suddenly jumped up, like a little leopard that had been released from its cage. With a whoosh, it jumped to Wang Liming's side. He Chen, Mo Lien, and the others couldn't help but cover their eyes. They saw the little guy kick Jing Minyao, who was lying on the ground, with a speed comparable to light, and sent her flying several feet away. Arbor waved his hand and an ice coffin landed on the ground with a thud, kicking up a small cloud of dust. This ice coffin was immediately enveloped by the light of the Seoul congregation bell. Arbor's eyes lit up. He raised his hand and caressed senior sister Su Shanshan's sleeping face through the layer of ice. At the same time, Jing Minyao's corpse was sent flying, landing on the sand with a loud thud. This was like a fierce hammer that landed on Wang Liming's heart. Chapter 34-23. As if someone had flipped a switch, Wang Liming jumped up and screamed as she charged towards Arbor. "Arbor, I'm going to kill you, I'm going to kill you." Wang Liming screamed as she charged towards Arbor. However, Xiao Mu didn't have time to waste words with her at this time. She directly kicked Wang Liming, who was pouncing at her, into the distance. With a wave of her hands, Xiao Mu bent down to pick up eldest senior sister from the coffin and laid her flat on the sandy ground. Jojo put away the ice coffin and quickly left the range of the Seoul convening bell. Just as she retreated, the Seoul congregation bell once again shot out a dazzling tricolored light that completely enveloped Su Shanshan. Arbor's eyes were filled with excitement. Her small face was brimming with rare joy. She looked up at Emo Lien and tugged at his sleeve, unable to conceal her excitement as she exclaimed, "Quickly look, Lien, eldest senior sister has been enveloped by the Seoul congregation bell's light." That's right. The light from the Seoul gathering bell had completely enveloped Su Shanshan at this moment, illuminating her fair and delicate little face. It was as if she had been painted with a layer of faint aurora, instantly giving her a trace of spirituality and life. "Don't worry, Jojo. The Seoul convening bell still needs some time to take effect," Ma Shurchin said with a smile. Arbor knew that she couldn't be too hasty. She nodded and looked at the copper bowl-sized Seoul gathering bell in front of her with bright eyes. Her eyes were filled with anticipation. Yet Emo Lien couldn't resist creasing his brows, and he reflexively grasped her small hand tightly. Looking at Xiao Xiao's expression, which was full of expectation, if she found out that the Seoul gathering bell was actually useless, would Xiao Xiao be so disappointed that she would fall silent? Emo Lien squeezed her small hand and couldn't resist saying, "Xiao Xiao, you promised me before." Xiao Mu was startled. Afterwards, she looked up at Emo Lien and discerned something from his extremely serious phoenix eyes. She nodded obediently and patted his chest comfortingly. "Don't worry, I know. It's good that grand senior sister wakes up, but if she doesn't, I'll find another way." How could she be the same as before, hiding in Paradise Planet for a few years as soon as she fell silent? Her current state of mind was far stronger than before. Moreover, Lotus was by her side. No matter what she encountered now, she would be able to handle it. Emo Lien looked at his wifey's expression and confirmed that she wasn't fooling him. He then let out a light sigh of relief and nodded with a smile. "I'm relieved that you can think this way. As long as his Jojo didn't go down a dead end, everything else could be solved later." The few of them exchanged a few words before Wang Liming ran over like a madwoman and slammed her head into the transparent barrier. Yes, it was the barrier. Now, the Seoul congregation bell had completely enveloped Grand Senior Sister, forming a complete, transparent barrier. Grand Senior Sister was lying peacefully inside the tricolored barrier. Xiao Mu gazed intently at the Seoul congregation bell. Only she could hear her thumping, thumping heart. It seemed that she had waited for too long. So long that she almost thought that Grand Senior Sister would never return to her side. Now, had the day finally arrived. Chapter 34-24. Su Shanshan was surrounded by the tricolored light, as if she was bathed in the tricolored holy light, serene and tranquil. Wang Liming was in a sorry state, but she struggled to crawl up from the ground. She scrambled over and hugged her daughter, Jing Minyao, before turning to glare at Xiao Mu with resentment and venomous eyes. She lowered her head and repeatedly called out, "Min Min, Min Min, Min Min." Jing Minyao's eyes were closed, motionless. Wang Liming reached out and touched Jing Minyao's nose, only to feel a bone-chilling cold. She couldn't help but shiver as she screamed out, "Min Min." She hurriedly hugged her daughter and rushed towards the tricolored barrier covered by the Seoul gathering bell. Her head hit the transparent barrier, and with 2 bangs she slammed into the barrier. However, the soul-gathering bell had already come into effect. The people outside naturally couldn't get in. What's more, it was a sacred tool. If it was so easy to break through the barrier, it would be ridiculous. Min Min. It's not like this. Wang Liming tried her best to hit the barrier and exclaimed, "It's not like this." "Mother!" Jing Qiyao rushed over and grabbed her mother's arm. "Mother, don't be like this, okay? Min Min can't be saved, mother." "Who said you can't be saved?" Wang Liming shook off Jing Qiyao's hand and glared at her, as if looking at an enemy. "You can't wait for your sister to die, can you? How could I give birth to such a heartless thing like you? If I knew you would become like this, I wouldn't have kept you when you made me suffer so much pain that I almost died from dystocia." Jing Qiyao's eyes widened in shock as she looked at her mother who said this in front of her. "So, it's not that I'm not good enough, and it's not that I'm disobedient. It's because when I was born, I almost caused mother's death, so mother has always looked down on me." Jing Qiyao sternly questioned. Her pair of eyes became incomparably red. Wang Liming hugged Jing Minyao in her arms and stiffly replied with a single word. Jing Qiao laughed like a madman. She finally had an answer to the question that had troubled her for so many years. However, it was better for her to have an answer like this forever. Good, good, good. Jing Qiao nodded repeatedly, her eyes coldly staring at Wang Liming and Jing Minyao. "Don't you love your youngest daughter the most? Don't you only have Min Min all day long?" Jing Qiao suddenly pounced over and grabbed Jing Minyao's legs, forcefully pulling her to her side. "What are you doing? What are you doing, Jing Qiao? Are you crazy?" Wang Liming screamed and rushed forward to save her daughter. "You're the crazy one. Look at your daughter, whom you dote on so much, and what kind of idiotic character she has become. Look at the sins you've committed." "Shut up!" Wang Liming screamed and interrupted Jing Qiao's words. She glared at Jing Qiao coldly and snapped, "I told you to shut up, shut up, shut up." Jing Qiao snatched Jing Minyao's body and choked Jing Minyao's neck, forcing her to raise that lifeless face. She laughed crazily. "Do you see? Do you see, my good mother? Your most obedient daughter is now thoroughly dead. She can't be saved." "Shut up." Wang Liming's eyes were bloodshot. Chapter 34-25. She tried to pounce on her several times, but was kicked away by Jing Qiao in her crazed state. Wang Liming fell to her knees with a plop, slapping the sand as she wailed, "How did I give birth to a beast like you? Beast, beast. You won't even let off your own sister. What sin have I, Wang Liming, committed?" Her husband was unreliable, her most beloved daughter couldn't be saved, and her second daughter, who was usually like an invisible person, was actually going against her like a madwoman at this time. She hated these people in front of her. She hated every single one of them. Wang Liming took out a spirit breakthrough pill from her ring and swallowed it. Her aura began to rise steadily. Jing Qiao's heart jumped. She grabbed Jing Minyao's neck and retreated a few steps. She stared vigilantly at her mother, and her voice became sharper as she shouted, "Mother, do you still not understand? Min Min can't be saved. Min Min has already used the soul congregation bell once. She can't use it a second time." I'll kill you, you beast." Wang Liming's eyes were red as she pounced on Jing Minyao, slapping her fair cheek. Arbor looked at this scene in astonishment. She opened her mouth slightly as if wanting to say something, but she didn't say anything and just tightly pursed her lips. Mo Lien looked down at her and reached out to pull her into her arms. She patted her lightly and said in a low voice, "See, I already said that this woman isn't our mother. Look at her selfish appearance. If it wasn't for her, how could the 2 daughters have ended up in such a situation where they were trying to kill each other?" Arbor slowly nodded. Her mother, Wei Ziqin, clearly knew that she wasn't her biological daughter, but she treated her as if she was her own for many years. Just like the third madam, Hua Shi, who didn't give birth to her 2 concubine sons, but still treated them like her own. Whenever they encountered trouble, she would protect them like a mother hen. Humans have feelings. Even though they are not your biological children, they are still better than your biological children. If you treat your children well, it is impossible for you not to reciprocate at all. Although the madam of the third branch was a little ignorant, and it wasn't a good thing to spoil her son like this, Arbor could vaguely see a bit of his mother's shadow in this madam. Furthermore, Madame Hua was not like Wang Liming, who spoiled her child excessively, so on the day of the birthday banquet, she had spoken out to help Madame Hua. This was the reason. They're both your daughters, but your heart is so biased. Arbor shook his head speechlessly. This Wang Liming could be considered a weirdo. She had been holding a grudge against her for so many years just because she couldn't give birth to the child on the day she gave birth. Watching the mother and daughter exchange a few moves back and forth, everyone felt a little speechless. Jing Minyao's body was now thrown to the ground by them. After taking the medicine, Wang Liming's power had greatly improved. Naturally, Jing Qiyao could not deal with her. Not long after, she was pressed under Wang Liming's body and slapped on the back of her head again and again. Jing Qiyao was thrown to the ground, her head and face covered in blood. She couldn't help but scream. Gradually, her voice grew weaker. Wang Liming was really ruthless. Slap after slap, her eyes were red as if she had gone mad. She slapped the back of her daughter's head again and again. Chapter 34-26. Only when Jing Qiao's screams could no longer be heard did Wang Liming come back to her senses. Ah! She screamed and looked at her blood-stained hands. Her hands trembled slightly. After shaking for a long time, she finally flipped Jing Qiao over. All of a sudden, she met Jing Qiao's angry eyes. Ah! She screamed and jumped up. She took a few steps back and sat on the ground. Arbor looked at this mother coldly. From the beginning to the end, they just stood by and watched. She didn't even care about her own daughter. Why should others care about her? What a joke. Wang Liming was obviously crazy. She kicked away Jing Qiao's body and staggered to get up. Holding Jing Minyao's cold body, she rushed toward the Soul Gathering Bell's tricolored barrier. Her head hit the barrier again and again. Wang Liming screamed like a madwoman. The Soul Gathering Bell is my daughter's, give it back to us. Soul Gathering Bell. Before she could make another move, she was swept by a fierce gust of wind. Hugging Jing Minyao's body, she stumbled and fell to the ground. Are you done being crazy? Mo Lien frowned and indifferently retracted her right hand. She looked at her coldly and said, your other daughter was right. Jing Minyao has already used the Soul Gathering Bell once. Even if you give her another chance, it will still be useless. Who said it's useless? If you say it's useless, then it's useless. Wang Liming was obviously crazy. Hugging Jing Minyao, she slammed into the barrier and screamed like a madwoman, I don't care. This Soul Gathering Bell originally belonged to the Panga clan. It should be used by us. Bang. Before she could crash into that isolation barrier, Mo Lien had flipped her over and sent her tumbling backwards. Wang Liming's face, hands, and body were all covered in blood. It was unknown whether it was from killing Jing Qiao or from her own blood. She slowly got up from the ground with a twisted expression. Suddenly, she threw away Jing Minyao in her hand and rushed in the direction of Arbor. I want you all to die. The venerable Peach Blossom Immortal's figure flashed and released several beams of saint power. Thousands of vines wriggled upwards and wrapped around Wang Liming's body. At the same time, the swirling air around Wang Liming's body filled the entire area. The venerable Peach Blossom Immortal narrowed his eyes and enveloped her in his defensive shield. Immediately everyone heard a loud boom. Wang Liming's entire body was instantly minced into pieces. Pieces of her body fell from the top of her head. Blood rained down from the sky. Xiao Mu reflexively hid in Mo Lien's arms. She creased her small brows and turned her small head away in disdain. This Wang Liming was like a lunatic. She actually wanted to use self-destruction to drag them down to hell with her? How could this be possible? Why didn't she think that there were so many transcendent realms present? How could they let her, a spirit master, self-destruct? It was simply a meaningless self-destruction. When Arbor turned his head to look again, Wang Liming's figure was already gone. Mo Lien flicked her finger and a cluster of black flames landed on the corpse on the ground. It burned her until there were no bones left. Burn Jing Minyao and Jing Qiao too. Arbor looked at Jing Qiao, who was facing the sky with her eyes wide open as if she was questioning God, why she was treated like this. He could not help but shake his head. Chapter 34:27. Wang Liming was truly interesting. She didn't like her daughter, Jing Qiao, very much because of her difficult labor. In the end, she was so deranged that she killed her. This kind of mother simply couldn't compare to her mother, Wei Ziqin. Zhou's lotus was right. Wang Liming and her mother, Wei Ziqin, were two completely different types of people. With a flick of Emolien's fingers, 2 clusters of black fire landed on Jing Minyao and her sister's bodies, incinerating them completely. Only then did everyone turn to look at Su Shanshan, who was enveloped by the Soul Congregation bell with her eyes closed and a peaceful expression on her face. A long time had passed, so long that Arbor couldn't help but slightly clench her fists. Her expression also started to show some unbearable restlessness. Emolien could see her unease, so she reached out to hold her small hand and said softly, "Don't be anxious." Could it be that it was as Lotus said, that this Soul Congregation bell really might have no effect on eldest senior sister? Arbor's hand, which was hidden in her sleeve, clenched tighter and tighter. The moment she thought of this, even her breathing seemed to quicken. Emolien pulled out her other small hand, which was hidden in her sleeve, and gently pried open her fingers one by one. She smiled and looked down at her. Zhou is nervous. Arbor nodded, her pair of black eyes staring unblinkingly at the man in front of her. Although she had already prepared herself for the worst, she still had great expectations and hopes in her heart. She wanted eldest senior sister to come back to life. She wanted eldest senior sister to return to the Holy Water sect. She had been lying alone in the ice coffin for so many years. It had been long enough. "Quickly look," Qi Xianxian shouted, drawing Arbor's attention back to eldest senior sister. The 3 beams of light shot out by the soul-gathering bell had already disappeared, and the whole bell was shrinking in the air. Then, it suddenly broke into pieces and fell to the ground. Emolien's reaction was the fastest. With a turn of his body, he had already arrived at Su Shanshan's side. With a move of his finger, a thin piece of white brocade unfolded and floated in the air, catching many of the fragments. The white cloth and a handful of shards fell into Emolien's hands. Emolien lifted a corner of the white satin and nodded in satisfaction. He then turned to smile at Xiao Mu, who had hurried to his side. Although this sacred weapon is useless now, its fragments can still be reused. Xiao Mu nodded with a before saying apathetically, "Although this Soul Congregation bell is a sacred weapon, it is a consumption-type sacred weapon. If we really want to compare, it is inferior to my feral, ink. Emolien, the venerable peach blossom immortal beamed. Zhou, quickly see if your senior sister has woken up." Arbor nodded and quickly walked to Su Shanshan's side. She crouched down and cautiously inched closer to Su Shanshan's small face, which had regained a bit of color. Her fingers very gently touched Su Shanshan's face. The feeling under her fingers was still very icy. Arbor almost didn't dare to touch her to see if she was breathing. Was this really just an empty joy? The little fellow's eyes were filled with disappointment. Before this, she had repeatedly warned herself to be calm. She had to be calm. She couldn't have too high of an expectation for anything, so as to avoid being endlessly disappointed. But actually she still couldn't help but feel a little elated in the depths of her heart. Qi Xianxian and the rest cautiously glanced at Arbor. Chapter 34:28. Everyone looked at each other. Liang Qingqing could not help but say in a small voice, "Zhou, your eldest senior sister seems to, she could not continue, but everyone knew what she was trying to say. It seemed to be useless. That's right, the soul-gathering bell had no effect on Su Shanshan. Although Su Shanshan was lying on the sandy ground, she did not have any reaction until now. Logically speaking, if the soul-gathering bell was useful, no matter how weak she should have slowly opened her eyes. Maybe it's because eldest senior sister has been gone for too long. This soul-gathering bell can't gather all of her soul for the time being. Don't worry, Jojo, we'll take it slow. Mo Lien felt that her comforting words were a bit dry. Arbor inched closer to her white jade-like face. She bit her lips. The disappointment and grievance in her heart was about to turn into the water of the ocean and surge out. Was it really impossible? She spent so much effort to save eldest senior sister, but in the end, she still failed? Everyone saw that the little fellow was in low spirits. They could not help but surround her, wanting to say a few words to comfort the little girl. But right at this moment, Su Shanshan seemed to have heaved a sigh of relief. She took a deep breath and exhaled again. She suddenly opened her eyes and coughed. Qi Xianxian, Liang Qingqing and the rest all opened their eyes wide. Mo Lien, Hu Jinchen and the rest were also slightly surprised. The soul-gathering bell really had the effect of gathering souls? Su Shanshan gasped for air and coughed heavily. She hadn't coughed for a long time. Arbor felt that the hand that she stretched out was trembling. She held her thin face. A pair of sparkling eyes, as if containing the most beautiful stars in the world, stared straight at her. Su Shanshan's eyes finally focused and fell on Arbor. From the initial confusion to shock, and then to joy, her eyes stared straight at Arbor for a long time. As if her brain was not enough, she dazedly tried to recall something, but also as if she could not remember anything. She just stared at her blankly. Cough, cough, cough. She subconsciously grasped Arbor's small hand tightly. For a moment, she was in a daze, feeling as if she didn't know what day it was. The junior sister in front of her had become even more exquisite, as if she was a few years older than her 12-year-old self. Big liar! Arbor bit his lips and spat out 3 words. His eyes were glowing with a faint red light as he stared at Su Shanshan without blinking. It was as if he wanted to freeze time at this moment. Su Shanshan's dazed eyes gradually became clearer. She wanted to speak, but she was choked by the air in her throat. She coughed violently, and Xiao Mu helped her up as she struggled. Little junior sister. Su Shanshan's voice startled even herself. That voice sounded like it had been crushed by countless wheels. It was so hoarse and dark that it made her feel a little apprehensive. Little junior sister, what's wrong with me? Su Shanshan looked confused. Big liar. Arbor looked at her with an aggrieved expression and wanted to punch her. But she decided against it. Eldest senior sister had just woken up, so her body should be very weak. You are all liars, Jojo said. When we were in Qinghe town, you said you would accompany me in the future and wouldn't let me be alone. Chapter 3429. But later I hugged third Martial Ant's head and placed her by your side. I called you eldest senior sister, and I called third Martial Ant, but neither of you paid any attention to me. As Arbor spoke, she felt that she was really strange. Why did it seem like transparent water droplets were falling from her eyes again? Su Shanshan's heart tightened. She felt that some of her memories seemed to be a bit jumbled up. Although she didn't quite understand what was going on, she still reached out and pulled her little junior sister into her arms, hugging her tightly. Then she said very firmly, word by word, Don't worry, little junior sister. Eldest senior sister won't lie to you in the future. Definitely. Arbor lay on her shoulder soundlessly. It seemed like she could only feel her body trembling slightly. But Su Shanshan felt that her shoulder was scorching hot, as if something was burning a hole there, as if something was pouring into her veins. It was as if everything in front of her seemed to come alive again. The 2 apprentice sisters went to Paradise Planet, as if they had endless things to talk about. Su Shanshan discovered that time had already moved forward by 4 years. Naturally, she was very surprised. She had too many things to understand. Although you asked Jojo 10 questions, she would probably only answer 1, but Su Shanshan had long gotten used to this little fellow's personality, so they could chat for a while. Mo Lien's side was much more straightforward. After Jojo left, Mo Lien summoned Huifeng and had him take people to finish off the Panga clan's patriarch Jing Ti, as well as all of the Panga's direct descendants. Don't leave any loose ends behind, Mo Lien instructed indifferently. Today, They brought so many people to force the Pangu clan's patriarch Jing to finish off his daughter, Jing Minyao. Although Patriarch Jing had given in, Mo Lien never believed that human nature would give in so easily. Patriarch Jing probably hated her and Jojo to the core right now. If he was given a chance, he would definitely plot a counterattack. That would be too troublesome. Mo Lien did not want to waste her time cleaning up the mess left by the Pangu clan. She might as well annihilate all their direct descendants. As for the old, weak, women and children of the Pangu clan, for the civilians, it did not matter much who was in power. As long as they had enough food and drinks, they were happy enough. Hui Feng led the Purple Forest Guard and a group of Clear Pass City Border Guards over. Arbor and Su Shanshan chatted for a while. Seeing that she didn't look well, he was worried that her body might not be able to take it, so he persuaded her to rest. By the time Arbor came out of Paradise Planet, Hui Feng had just returned with his men, and he quietly reported to Mo Lien several times. Mo Lien nodded indifferently, indicating for Hui Feng not to say anything else. She then walked towards Arbor. Xiao Mu glanced at him in confusion. "What are you blabbering about?" "Nothing." Mo Lien smiled and pinched her little face. "Jojo, come with me." "Okay." Arbor followed him and returned to the Pangu clan's camp. Arbor suddenly remembered the people he had stored into his storage talisman. He waved his hand and let them all out. The Pangu clansmen all knelt down in gratitude and thanked him for saving their lives. They had all seen how dangerous the situation had been and remembered it in their hearts. The Crown Princess had put aside their former enmity and stored them into a magical artifact. That was how a great disaster had been averted. Chapter 3430. To the Pangu clansmen, they didn't know that it was Arbor's storage talisman. They only thought it was a spatial artifact. In any case, no matter what, the Crown Princess was so magnanimous that she didn't vent her anger on the Pangu clansmen and saved their lives regardless of the gains and losses. Everyone was grateful and respectfully knelt on the ground to express their gratitude. Mo Lien had Hui Feng make arrangements for these people. Before Arbor left, he heard Hui Feng say in a clear voice, "Your clan leader was obliterated by the heavenly Tao in this earth tornado. As for your madam and the two young misses, they were also executed by our crown prince for disobeying his superiors. You don't have a leader now. You should first elect a new leader and then talk to our crown prince." Arbor looked up at Mo Lien curiously. "Jingjia is dead?" Mo Lien smiled and nodded. "You sent someone to do it?" She remembered that Jingjia was still alive and well before they left the camp. Mo Lien didn't deny it. He nodded and held her hand. "Jojo, don't be afraid." Arbor was speechless. "What's there to be afraid of?" Mo Lien blinked and looked down at her. "Don't you think I'm scary?" Miss Chiao shook her head and hugged his waist. "Everything you do is for me. Why would I think you're scary? Plus, you're so beautiful." "Nothing you do is scary at all." Sir Jojo rolled his eyes and looked away. What was Jojo thinking just now? His expression was a bit cute. Mo Lien couldn't help but ask curiously, "Jojo, what were you thinking about just now?" "Nothing." Seeing that Mo Lien was determined to get to the bottom of things, Arbor quickly changed the topic. "What did you say you were going to take me to see?" Come take a look, Xiao Xiao." Mo Lien pulled her small hand and led her into an airtight wall made of sand and soil. As soon as he walked in, he was dazzled by the white spirit coins on the ground. "Is this where Jingjia keeps his spirit coins?" Arbor grabbed a handful of spirit coins and found many jade stones buried underneath. She took out a piece and looked at it. A rare smile appeared in her eyes. "This jade is not bad. Get someone to take it out and polish it. Make more blank jade talismans for me." "All right." Mo Lien naturally agreed happily. She pulled Arbor to a small table at the side, took out a black spatial ring, and placed it in her hand. "Clan leader Jing is dead, but his spatial ring is still here. Take it and see if there's anything useful inside." Arbor nodded. Recently, she had organized the Heavenly Province Assembly and the Heavenly Pill Auction. Nurturing people to draw talismans and refine pills was like burning money every day. She had to send them a batch of talismans and herbs every few days. She probably wouldn't be able to make a profit in the first year. However, when these little guys grew up, she wouldn't have to worry about making money every year. Moreover, nurturing a group of talisman masters and alchemists would be very beneficial. If she wanted to do something in the future, she wouldn't feel that she was short of manpower. Arbor used her divine sense to open clan leader Jing's spatial ring. She found that there were many things inside. It was enough for the Heavenly Province Assembly and the Heavenly Pill Auction to burn money for a while. Moreover, there were so many spirit coins on the ground. It should be enough. Arbor happily put all the spirit coins on the ground into a storage talisman. Then she followed Emollient out. Your Highness. Chapter 34-31. Two purple forest guards pushed a bearded, doddering old man over. They shoved him to the ground and used their feet to stop him from struggling. Your Highness, this person is sneaking around here. Who is he? Speak. Or you. Emollient looked at him coldly, a cold glint flashing through her eyes. This person was hiding here sneakily. He was most likely a servant of the Jing clan's direct line of descent. Was he waiting for an opportunity to take revenge? She had to see if she was cut out for it. The Divine Province's Crown Prince and Crown Princess sure aren't impressive. Slap. Before the old servant could finish, the purple forest guard slapped him across the face. His face tilted slightly to the side, and his hair fell messily to the ground. His wrinkled old face suddenly showed a trace of twisted hatred. You bunch of bandits! Not only did you steal our clan's treasure, the Soul Congregation Bell, you even instigated those spineless shrimp clansmen to submit to you. And now, you even killed the clan head and madam. Oh! Arbor sized up the old servant from head to toe, then asked coolly, Who are you to the Jing clan head? You don't need to know. Slap. The purple forest guard slapped him again in anger at his arrogant attitude. How dare you speak like that? The purple forest guard glared at him, then turned to the young crown princess. Crown princess, this subordinate must deal with this person. Arbor glanced at him and nodded. Since you're so loyal, go accompany your clan head and madam. Fear flashed through the old man's eyes. Then he put on a fierce front and angrily rebuked, Wait! Xiao Mu turned her head to look at him with a spurious smile. If you really are a loyal old servant, then where were you when I killed your clan leader just now? Why didn't you jump out to protect your master? You're afraid of death, aren't you, old man? Since you're just a sneaky villain, can you stop trying to flatter yourself? The purple forest guard glanced at the old man with disdain. He grabbed the old man's arm, pinned him behind his back, and pushed him. Let's go. He was an eyesore. He was really annoying their little crown princess. Crown princess, this old servant wants to make a deal with you. The old servant suddenly became anxious and shouted while twisting his body. Since it's a deal, then show your sincerity. Why do you have to be so pretentious? Arbor looked at him coldly. This old man had been secretly hiding here and sneakily looking around. He had originally been waiting for her and the crown prince. He had even put on a disgusting expression of loyalty to protect his master. Who exactly was he trying to show? The old man's eyes flashed and he hurriedly said, This old servant is called Jingu. Yes, I am clan head Jing's personal servant. Arbor didn't say anything and waited for him to continue. Not long ago, the clan head ordered me to send people to the lower star field to investigate the crown princess background. When the second miss was brutally slaughtered by the crown princess and was carried back to the Soul Congregation Bell to gather her soul, clan head Jing ordered this old servant to send people to investigate. Arbor looked at the old man expressionlessly, a burning flame dancing in her eyes. Seeing that she didn't say anything, the old man could only continue. After that, this old servant sent a group of people to the lower star field. The first few times we went, we were blocked outside by a large shielding formation. The old man carefully glanced at Arbor's expression. Chapter 34-32. There were also a few times where they lost their lives in special passageways. Therefore, this old servant has sent out about 10 groups of people, but it seems that only one group successfully arrived at the capital of the Mo Kingdom. It's this group of people who arrived at the Mo Kingdom capital with great difficulty. They've sent back 2 messages to me, saying that another group of people also arrived at the Mo Kingdom capital at the same time. It seems like they also want to attack your family. However, it's very unfortunate that the group of people I sent later seem to have been annihilated by someone in the Mo Kingdom capital. They were like pebbles thrown into the sea, and no more news came back. After saying this, that old man glanced at the expressionless Xiao Mu again. He gritted his teeth and said, "This old man means, I know that you want to say that Jing Minyao is merely taking the blame for someone else. The real culprit may still be hiding behind the scenes." Arbor said coldly, "Jing Minyao also said that Jolin was thrown to her by a black-robed man. Who is this black-robed man?" The old man's eyes flickered, and he shook his head and said, "This old servant does not know." Arbor shot him a cold glance. "What do you want by saying so much?" "Honorable Crown Princess." The old man suddenly changed into a rather flattering attitude, bowed and said, "This old servant is telling you all this because," his eyes rolled and he chuckled. "This old servant is also an old member of the Pangu clan. Even if I don't know the Pangu clan's past like the back of my hand, I am still very, get to the point." Arbor coldly interrupted him, looking at him with a mocking gaze. "Crown Princess, if you can hand over the Pangu clan to this old servant to manage," then, as soon as he finished speaking, the thunderous cheers of the Pangu clan members came from the other side. The new clan leader candidate had probably been chosen. Arbor looked at him with a mocking gaze. "You heard it too. You don't have a chance." Jing Chu gritted his teeth unwillingly, but he still said with an obsequious smile, "In that case, Crown Princess, please agree to a small request of mine. I was originally the guardian of the Soul Convening Bell. I have an extraordinary sense of familiarity with the Soul Gathering Bell. Now that the Soul Gatherer Bell has been destroyed." He sighed and said, "Then this old servant would like to request that the fragment of the Soul Congregation Bell be returned to this old servant for safekeeping, so that I can get rid of this thought. I have nothing else to ask for. Crown Princess, please grant this small request of yours." Arbor sized him up and then turned to Mo Lien. "Is there anything else other than the broken pieces of the Soul Gathering Bell?" When Jing Gu heard the little Crown Princess ask this question, although he tried his best to remain calm, his heart was like a huge wave rolling over and over. He wished he could pounce on the Crown Princess and bite her to death. This little girl was too smart. He hadn't even said anything yet, but she was able to make the connection from just a few words. Mo Lien curiously took out the white satin cloth that wrapped the soul amassing bell fragment from her inner world. After flipping it open, her fingertips moved around the fragment and took out a black key that was only the size of a little finger. The color of the key and the fragment were very similar, so the Crown Prince didn't notice it before. Prince Mo looked at the old man Jinggu with a smile that wasn't a smile. The corner of his mouth curled, and he raised the little key with his fingertips, revealing a trace of a smile. "Many thanks." Naturally, he had to thank this Jinggu for providing such reliable information. Chapter 34-33. That way, they would be able to find the treasures buried by clan leader Jing. Jinggu was truly regretting his actions now. He was suspended in the air, and the whip in the purple forest guard's hand was lashing out at him without hesitation. If he'd known earlier that this black-hearted couple was so terrifying, he wouldn't have come looking for trouble even if he was beaten to death. Jinggu groaned inwardly. "My life is over. Dig 3 feet into the ground and push aside all the sand walls. Everyone dig here." Jinggu was shoved to the ground, his hair disheveled. His old eyes were filled with anger and despair. "You bandits, you'll all die a horrible death." "Bandits?" The venerable Peach Blossom Immortal looked at him in amusement and kicked him. "Aren't you also coveting the treasures buried by clan leader Jing?" As the leader of a clan, he was naturally rich enough to rival an entire nation. The small treasure room Mo Lien had brought Jojo to was clearly only a small part of what was exposed above. Jinggu, this old man, was truly crafty. Regardless of whether it was his pretense of being a loyal servant at the beginning or his fawning talk about wanting to be the clan head, It was all to mislead the young Crown Prince Consort and His Highness the Crown Prince into thinking that he was a petty person without any shrewdness. They would think that Jinggu, this petty person, wanted to be the clan head. He was trying to divert the young couple's attention. Actually, that wasn't the case. His true goal was the treasury key hidden in the soul convening bell. With this treasure, it didn't matter if he became the Pangu clan leader or not. He also didn't want to eat dust and drink dirt all day long in this desert. With wealth, he would naturally be able to fly far away. No matter where he settled down, he reckoned that he would be a person with wealth in his hands and would be able to get whatever he wanted. Bang bang. The large excavating tool forcefully excavated the ground that was buried in layers of sand, revealing a long and flat underground staircase that was about a few meters wide in the middle. Arbor handed several dozen storage talismans to the venerable Peach Blossom Immortal and had him take little Tai Sui, Liang Qingqing, and the others down to collect the items. They busied themselves until night fell. After the group of people came up, Qi Xianxian's small face was flushed red. She pulled Arbor and chattered nonstop. "You don't know, but that Jing clan leader is really a master at accumulating wealth. I feel that no matter how much money your small organization like the Heavenly Elixir Store burns, 30 million spirit coins a day, it can still burn for decades." Arbor's eyes lit up. He took the pile of storage talismans from the venerable Peach Blossom Immortal and checked them one by one. His eyes lit up even more. "I'm rich." Everyone looked at her amused expression and couldn't help but want to laugh. Jing Ting of the Panga clan was indeed a hidden magnate, as Xianxian said. "What do you want?" Arbor asked his companions. Everyone shook their heads. They usually ate and lived on Paradise Planet, so they didn't really need anything else besides. Jojo had left all the treasures in Paradise Planet's treasure vault. If they needed anything, they could just call him and go get it. Arbor blinked, nodded, and said to Qi Xianxian, "This time, the Mu clan won against me. Later, we can go to their Morning Sun Pavilion to play. I'll take you there." In other words, it was better to go back and scam the Mu clan. Everyone, the Mu clan was really unlucky to have provoked a little devil like you. Chapter 34-34. Seeing that everyone was speechless, Sir Jojo turned his head and said, "All right, the matter here is over. Let's, Crown Princess, Crown Prince, the new leader of the Pangu clan requests an audience." Prince Mo nodded calmly and gestured for the guards to let him in. The new leader of the Pangu clan was a rather young man. After seeing the Crown Prince and Crown Princess, he bowed. Li Zhuang greets the Crown Prince and Crown Princess. Mo Lian glanced at him coldly. "What are your plans for the future?" The Pangu clan is a clan that loves peace the most. Li Zhuang placed one hand across his chest and swore solemnly. "From tomorrow onwards, I will lead my people into the depths of the desert and search for the existence of an oasis. The Aurora Desert is so vast and boundless. It can't be all sand, can it?" Li Zhuang said. Arbor glanced at him and suddenly said, "Then you can search in the southeast direction." Her origin of holy would allowed her to clearly sense the existence of an oasis thousands of miles to the southeast. It was a very large oasis. If the Pangu clan built their residence there, they would be able to survive well in the future. They would not have to give up their land and rely on the Emperor of the Divine Land. Of course, without the Pangu clan as a hidden danger, the Emperor of the Divine Land would not have to be so paranoid. He felt that the Pangu clan, who was so close to Qingyue City, might one day start a rebellion for the sake of survival. In this way, both sides would benefit from it. Li Zhuang's eyes lit up. Obviously, he trusted the young Crown Princess very much. Of course, this was also because the Crown Princess' benevolence at the moment of the Earth Tornado's attack had completely convinced the young leader of the Pangu clan. He nodded and said, "Thank you for the reminder, Crown Princess. The members of the Pangu clan will always remember your help." Princess Jing, Li Zhuang looked at Arbor and Mo Lian hesitantly. As a matter of fact, although Chief Jing's family was not very reliable, Princess Jing, who had been protecting a member of the Pangu clan and had made great military achievements, was indeed respected by all her people. However, after the Earth Tornado struck, they had never seen the princess again. They did not know how she was doing now. Xiao Mu creased her brows. She had also remembered. In the previous battle with Jing Linyao, she seemed to have coincidentally advanced to the divine realm. She just didn't know if the advancement would go smoothly. Because of the violent earth tornadoes, Arbor's attention didn't leave her at all. If she was at the critical moment of her advancement, she would be affected more or less. Jing Linyao was probably doomed. If Jing Linyao comes back, will your words still count as the clan leader? Mo Lien looked coldly at the young leader in front of her. Even a fool could see the threat in her eyes. He didn't want Jing Linyao to instigate and fool them, and they would turn around and deal with his Qiao Qiao. If these people were still troublesome, Prince Mo would not be merciful to them. The Panga clan can swear to the heavens that they will never betray the crown princess. Li Zhuang hurriedly explained with one hand across his chest. Very good. Mo Lien glanced at him coldly. Remember what you said today. Chapter 34-35. Go back to your oasis obediently and live a good life. Don't do anything unnecessary. I, Li Zhuang, will remember what your highness said today. Li Zhuang bowed respectfully. When he turned to leave, the cold sweat on his forehead was already dripping down. The crown prince's eyes were too cold. What he meant was that he had to hold the position of clan leader and not let Jing Linyao take it away from him again. If Jing Linyao and the members of the Panga clan were up to some trouble to deal with the crown prince's wife, the crown prince would certainly not tolerate them anymore. Clan leader. At this time, several Panga clan members walked over with a woman who was screaming desperately and an average-looking young man. Li Zhuang glanced at them and sighed. Concubine Shui, young master, I'm really sorry. What are you doing? Li Zhuang. What are you doing, Li Zhuang? Li Zhuang. Concubine Shui shrieked and glared at him. Her eyes seemed to be spitting fire. Li Zhuang glanced at the mother and son coldly and sighed. Suddenly, he raised his voice and said, the old clan leader has passed away and there is no one to accompany him. Concubine Shui and young master, for the sake of the former clan leader, swear to live and die with clan leader. Concubine Shui's eyes were so wide that they almost fell out of their sockets. She kept twisting her body and screaming, no, no, who wants to accompany that dead man to hell? Oh no. Li Zhuang. Let go, let go. The young man's eyes were lifeless and his whole body trembled. He wailed in a low voice, I don't want to die, I don't want to die, I don't want to die. Li Zhuang raised his hand and ordered people to take the mother and son away and send them on their way. An old man stepped out and nodded at Li Zhuang in appreciation. Clan leader, you don't need to feel guilty. Keeping concubine Shui and young master Jing alive is a disaster. Concubine Shui has never been a person who is willing to stay still. If she gets a chance, she will definitely implicate the clan leader in the future. The Panga clan has been through too many hardships. The old man sighed. In the future, we will be safe and smooth. This is the wish of all the Panga clan members. Jolin suddenly opened his eyes and jumped up from the bed. Looking around, his mind was a little muddled. What is this place? She shook her head and subconsciously held her forehead with one hand. She was in a very elegant bamboo house, and the furniture in the house looked very exquisite. There was a string of small wind chimes hanging at the door, tinkling in the wind. Arbor was the first to sense that his sister had woken up. He entered Paradise Planet and arrived at the small bamboo building behind Peach Garden Slope. She reached out and pushed the door open. There was a creak. One of the two sisters looked into the room, while the other looked back at each other. Their gazes just happened to meet. Jolin stared blankly for a while before his eyes suddenly lit up with surprise. Sister! She stretched out her hands and stumbled over to Qiao Mu, throwing herself into Qiao Mu's embrace. She even rubbed her head against Qiao Mu's chest as she muttered, This dream was so good. I dreamt of Big Sister again. Big Sister seems to be more beautiful than before. If Xiao Xin knew that I dreamt of Big Sister, he would be very jealous. Xiao Xin is an idiot. He wants to dream of Big Sister every time, but he can't. Ha. Chapter 34-36. Arbor was speechless as he looked down at his silly and adorable sister. He reached out a small hand and gently stroked her head. Little Lin. Jolin's head rubbed left and right against her neck with a blissful expression on her face. Big sister, did you bring me something delicious? Arbor was speechless. Our family has never mistreated you, right, sister? Why is it that the moment you see sister, you want to eat cough? Arbor reached out and pulled little Lin's head away a little. He looked at her with a serious expression and said, "It's not a dream." It's not a dream. Jolin repeated her words. Her eyes curved into crescents as she raised her little neck and stared at her blankly for a long while. Then her eyes suddenly widened, and a high-pitched cry broke through the little bamboo house. I'm not dreaming? Arbor could not help but raise his hand to his forehead. He got up and brought his sister to the table to sit down. He poured her a cup of fragrant tea and placed it in her palm. Sister is sitting right beside you. You're not dreaming. Jolin put down the cup in her hand. Suddenly, she reached out and pinched Arbor's little face. It doesn't hurt. Arbor stared at his stupid sister speechlessly. You pinched me. Of course it doesn't hurt. Your sister, why is she doing the same thing as the little monk? If Arbor had a beard, he would definitely be blowing his beard and glaring at her right now. Jolin looked at her embarrassedly. Benefactress. 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 Jolin chuckled. Why am I hallucinating? Did you hear Kongkong's voice? No hallucinating. Arbor got up and walked to the door. He reached out and opened the door. He saw the little monk with a shiny bald head running in with small steps. It's Kongkong. Arbor turned and said to little Lin. Jolin's eyes widened instantly, and she jumped up from the stool. Kongkong. Xiao Lin pounced over and hugged the chubby little monk. She raised her hand and heavily slapped his butt. You little rascal, you really worried me to death. Kongkong hurriedly covered her buttocks with her hands and cried out in panic. How dare you? How dare you, Benefactress's younger sister? You how dare you? Men and women shouldn't touch each other. How can you spank this little monk's butt? He stuttered. His chubby little face even had a look of horror on it. It was hilarious. The corner of Arbor's mouth twitched, and he raised his hand to his forehead speechlessly. Xiao Lin, on the other hand, was all smiles. She hugged the little monk lovingly and said, my chatterbox is really so noisy and empty. I missed you so much. Come, let me give you a kiss. What nonsense are you spouting? No kissing. The little monk pressed his hand against Jolin's mouth and said with a serious expression, This little monk is never talkative or noisy. This little monk is just a little talkative sometimes. Jolin laughed loudly. She turned and ran to Arbor's side with Kongkong in her arms. She placed Kongkong on the seat beside her and reached out to hug Arbor. She rubbed her big head against her neck. Sister, sister, sister. Arbor's heart melted into a mess from her rubbing. A faint smile appeared on her lips. She reached out and stroked her fluffy little head. She sighed softly and said, Little Lin, you're almost a big girl. If Mother sees you like this, she'll scold you again. Mother? Jolin was startled. She remembered something important and quickly put on a serious expression. Chapter 34-37. Grasping Arbor's hand, Xiao Lin said anxiously, Sister, let's hurry back. Hurry back to Seekong Planet. Many people have barged into the Mo Kingdom capital and made a beeline for our home, wanting to deal with us. However, due to the various talisman arrays you set up in the sky above our home, these people can't completely break in for the time being. But they've already started using the lives of the city's citizens to threaten us. The old great king of the Mo Kingdom is at his wit's end. Don't be anxious, speak slowly. Arbor's eyes instantly turned incomparably icy, and she stroked the back of Xiao Lin's hand. Sister already knows the gist of the matter. It won't take much time to go to Seekong Planet. We can set off immediately. Arbor's indifferent voice seemed to be filled with the power to pacify people's hearts, instantly pacifying Xiao Lin's fretful and uneasy emotions. Sister. Xiao Lin hurriedly said, Really? Our trip to Seekong planet really won't take much time? Why did she remember that when those black-clothed men captured her and brought her here, they seemed to have passed through a very long passageway? In that passageway, her entire body was scraped painfully by the airflow, as if she could die at any time. Just the time spent in that passageway alone felt like it had exceeded 24 hours. Arbor nodded and placed the teacup in her hand again. You just recovered from a serious illness and need to properly recuperate. Tell sister clearly how many people have invaded the Mo Kingdom capital. About 20-something people. The number doesn't seem to be many, but their cultivations are all very high. Every one of them is a peak great mystic cultivator. At this point, Xiao Lin's eyes revealed a faint trace of panic. I saw them directly exterminate 3 level 10 great mystic cultivators with a raise of their hands. The Mo Kingdom capital's guards have suffered countless casualties. Sister, let's leave right now. I'm afraid that if we delay any longer, even the old great king and them won't be able to hold on. Arbor nodded. She stood up and opened the door to the small bamboo house, leading Xiao Lin out. Seeing the sisters come out, Mo Lien, He Chen, and the others turned to look over, asking, "What are your plans now?" Jojo. Let's return to Seekong planet first. Mo Lien frowned. Alright, how's the situation over there? Is it serious? Before Arbor could speak, Xiao Lin quickly nodded and said, "Brother-in-law, let's go back quickly. I'm afraid it's been a few days since I was captured. I'm worried that my parents won't be able to hold on for much longer." Once those people broke through the talisman array above the Qiao residence, the consequences would be unimaginable. Right now, with Big Sister's array formation, we can still hold on for a bit. Jolin said, but when I left, those people were already impatiently capturing people in the city to threaten your father. I'm worried that the old great king might not be able to hold on. Currently, the Mo Kingdom capital's guards were helping the Qiao family fend off the invaders. Once the old great king was forced to withdraw his troops, Jolin didn't dare to imagine the consequences. Mo Lien's eyebrows flashed with a hint of hostility. A bunch of death-seeking maniacs, they really were tired of living. Arbor walked to his side and reached out to grab his hand, saying softly, "Don't worry, we'll go back right now. Those who vainly tried to touch our family, let them pay with their lives," Arbor said indifferently, not revealing the slightest trace of anger on her face. Chapter 34-38. Xiao Lin, who boarded the Crimson Nimbus Blue Wave ship for the first time, found everything very novel and couldn't resist wandering around the ship. Unexpectedly, it only took a short hour to return to Seekong planet from the Divine Province. The Crimson Nimbus Blue Wave ship wandered through the Sea of Stars for no more than a few seconds before arriving at the passageway. When it passed through the passageway, Xiao Lin didn't feel anything at all. It was completely unlike when she first arrived, when her entire body suffered from the intense pain of being sliced apart by the airflow. This feeling was simply too wondrous. It was as if time and space had been changed in the blink of an eye. By the time the party returned to the Mo Kingdom capital, starry night had descended, and darkness had pervaded the earth. The old great King Mo Lei was currently in a terrible fix. Gong Chang strode in on his short, chubby legs as he reported loudly, Great King, bad news, His 12th Highness has brought people to the Qiao family." "What?" Mo Lei couldn't resist slapping his forehead. He abruptly turned to look at the elderly man who was currently sitting on the main seat and coldly looking at him. At this moment, a trace of cold sweat had appeared on the old great king's forehead. Gong Chang also saw that elderly man at a glance and was so frightened that he rolled to the ground, not daring to look up with his head on the ground as he inwardly cursed. Old Senior Wu truly appeared and disappeared unpredictably. When did he come to the palace? Gong Chang didn't know that this old Senior Wu had already arrived earlier and had even finished discussing matters with Mo Lei. Due to this senior's oppression, Mo Lei had already agreed earlier that he could no longer send troops to reinforce the Qiao family from now on. Unexpectedly, Mo-12, this little rascal, actually left the palace without permission and brought people to help. Didn't they just capture this little 12 the day before yesterday? Who knew that this child would actually be so disobedient? Mo cautiously cast a glance at the elderly man and cupped his hands, saying, "Senior Wu." The elderly man casually waved his hand, stopping the old great king from continuing. His eyes carried a trace of coldness as he glanced at him and said, "It seems that the great king wants to feign compliance?" "No, that's not it." Cold sweat broke out on Emole's forehead. He stood up with an uneasy expression. "Bring him here." As the cries reached his ears, a group of beautiful concubines, as well as some pale-faced princesses of different ages, were all escorted over. Royal father, save me, royal father." 10th Princess Emole's tear-stained face was covered with tears. Royal father. The mother of the 9th princess and the 10th princess, concubine Shi, was also trembling in fear. She covered her handkerchief and sobbed. Suddenly, he was stopped by a cold reprimand that was neither loud nor soft. "What are you crying for?" "Shut your mouth." Empress Zhao looked coldly at concubine Shi and her 2 daughters. Great king, save us." Concubine Shi had just opened her mouth when Empress Zhao raised her hand and slapped her face. "I told you to shut up. Don't you understand?" Shi Pin immediately kept quiet out of fear. Old Wu sneered. He raised his hand and had people drag out a young woman with a beautiful face and luxurious clothes from the group of concubines and princesses. The old great king's heart was about to break when he saw that woman being dragged out. He looked at old Wu with a deathly pale face and repeatedly waved his hand, saying, "Let's talk things over. My lord, please talk things over." It's said that this noble Lady Ying is the great king's most favored concubine. Old Wu chuckled coldly and indifferently waved his hand at one of his subordinates. Chapter 34-39. Noble Lady Ying didn't look sideways. She didn't even make a sound when she was pushed out by the crowd. She only stared coldly at old Wu. Good. Old Wu smiled in praise. "You have backbone. You're a woman with backbone." Although he was smiling, he couldn't hide the cold, murderous intent in his eyes. The great King Emo stood up in a fluster and shouted at old Wu, What do you want?" "We already promised you that we won't send reinforcements to the Qiao family. Why are you still capturing people? Is the great king joking?" Old Wu snorted, his gaze sweeping over the red-faced great king. "Didn't this old eunuch say just now? Did your 12th prince bring reinforcements again?" 12th, how could 12th do this?" Concubine, she cried out sharply. "It was this consort's order." Empress Zhao coldly interrupted concubine Shi's cry and looked indifferently at old Wu. "The great king is being threatened by a crafty villain like you because of our lives. But they're afraid of death, but this consort isn't." Empress Zhao stared coldly at old Wu and said with a sneer, "If you want to kill me, then do as you please. The Qiao family is the crown princess's maternal family, which means they are our Mo family's in-laws. Now that our in-laws are in trouble, how can we not help them? Great king, do what you should do. Don't worry about us." "What?" Concubine Shi's face instantly turned incomparably pale. She couldn't help but roar at Empress Zhao, "Queen, you don't want to live, but we. My Mo Shui and Mo Li are still in their prime. Can you bear to let them sacrifice their lives for the Qiao family and die in vain?" "Idiot." Empress Zhao glared at her coldly. "Today, we were indifferent to the Qiao family's matter. In order to survive, we disregarded the Qiao family's safety. When my son returns in the future, I'm afraid you won't be able to keep your rotten life." Concubine Shi's face turned pale. Thinking of Prince Mo's methods, she was speechless and kept quiet out of fear. Mo Lei sighed. He was caught in a dilemma. This batch of experts who had invaded the Mo kingdom capital were all peak great mystic cultivators. Few people in the entire Mo kingdom capital could contend against them. Furthermore, not only did they threaten him with the concubines and princesses, but they also threatened him with the lives of some innocent commoners. In these 2 days, they had killed quite a few people on the streets of the Mo kingdom capital. The entire city had practically flowed with blood, and corpses were strewn everywhere. It wasn't that he only cared about the lives of his concubines and daughters. This also involved thousands of innocent people. He had no choice but to agree not to send more troops to assist the Qiao family. He also knew that once he made this decision, the enmity between him and the little crown princess would deepen. The old great king heaved a long sigh, and his entire body slumped down on the throne. Great king. Empress Zhao's cold voice sounded indifferently. Just stick to your heart. There's no need to have any misgivings. Do as you wish. Do you think they'll really let us off after killing the Qiao family? Let the entire city's commoners off? Empress Zhao said apathetically. They came from the upper realm with the intention of destroying the Qiao family or abducting their entire family. Perhaps we, the insiders, have already become their next targets to be silenced. Mo Lei's mind cleared up a little for once. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.